Chapter 5:11. Great Chief Orgrim's lungs were about to explode from anger. As a ferocious warrior, Orgrim had never believed in fate or anything like that. He had failed time and time again. Even Orgrim, who had an incomparably firm will, started to waver. Is Duque really my nemesis? When this question appeared in his mind, he could no longer suppress the uneasiness in his heart. Every night, he would dream of his own failure. He would remember the pain and anger that Duque had brought him. He could not suppress it. Orgrim pointed to the top of the cave and took up a stance with his right hand. In the next moment, Orgrim used his famous Hammer of Destruction as a super-large, hidden weapon. The sudden burst of magma-like heat increased the temperature of the entire tunnel. Everyone's field of vision was lit up. The scorching heat came from afar, and the surging wave of heat passed through the gap between Abendis and Sidan. The irresistible heat made the two scream in pain, and they quickly dodged to the left and right. Even so, their arms were still stained with magma-like viscous substance. The horrifying heat passed through the gauntlet and traveled to their arms, and they both felt a burning pain on their skin. Ah! Abendis could not help but pull out the short sword tied to his thigh, and cut off the ropes on the gauntlet. Before the heat completely burned his arm to the gauntlet, he clenched his teeth and tore off the gauntlet, not caring that it was stuck to his hair and a small piece of skin. Ugh! Holy Knights always took advantage. Under the protection of the holy light, Sidan took off the gauntlet and threw it away without any injuries. At this moment, the one who felt the most numb was Gavinrad. Soldiers trained for 1,000 days were used in a single moment. Whether it was to save energy for Duque to deal with the protectors, or to maintain Duque's cool, Gavinrad had to take this blow for Duque. If it was the old Gavinrad, he would not be able to take it with just the holy light. However, after Duque released the shackles of fate, the strengthened version of Gavinrad could still put up a fight. Gavinrad swung his giant iron two-handed hammer like he was playing golf. It drew a huge arc on the ground and accurately met Orgrim's Hammer of Destruction. The lightning energy awakened from the storm altar crashed into Orgrim's flame energy. The collision of the two violent elemental energies instantly lit up the entire underground passageway as if it was daytime. The corpses on the ground suddenly jumped up as if they had come back to life due to the vibrations of the power. Soon after, they were either burnt to a crisp by the uncontrollable flames and lightning power, or directly carbonized by the lightning power. The violent elemental energy spread in all directions, and the huge tiles on the floor of the passageway stacked up layer by layer like broken waves. It was a ghastly sight. It was like experiencing a small, terrifying earthquake. Gavinrad was in a sorry state, but he managed to hold on. It was impossible for Orgrim's flying hammers to be replenished every second. Gavinrad's quality was not good enough, but he was good enough. At that moment, Gavinrad did not know how many times he had cheered for himself. The result of the collision of the two hammers was that Gavinrad sent Hammer of Destruction, flying like a high-flying ball. Duque's face was momentarily stunned. Then, Duque revealed a smile that Orgrim wanted to slap him to death 10,000 times. At this time, Duque actually had the time to wave his hand and make a bye-bye gesture to Orgrim. Orgrim was on the verge of losing his mind. As he charged, he picked up a large hammer that was obviously used by a centurion and charged forward. Behind him, Kilrog and the other chieftains charged forward as well. At this critical moment, a new group of Alliance army arrived. They were Uther and Tyrion Fordring. After knowing that Duque was still there, Tyrinas finally made the decision to raise the stakes. He sent the last reserve team over as well. This decision directly caused most of the top forces of the Alliance and the Horde to start a decisive battle in this rather narrow passage for an army. After entering the Iron Gate, it was pitch black. The Red Dragon Queen is imprisoned here. Marion, who was holding her staff, was confused. Her vision was not as good as Sasha's, but her night vision talent still allowed her to see further and clearer than Duque's. What entered her vision was a vast expanse of emptiness. Just be careful. Almost as soon as Duque finished speaking, the air in front of them suddenly flashed, and thousands of small fireballs exploded out of thin air. These fireballs spun quickly and merged with each other. Finally, they formed a blurry human figure, and the silhouette quickly became clear. This was a huge flaming puppet, the guardian of Demon's Soul. It was a magical life form that was unknown to outsiders. "Get out of my way!" Marion roared angrily, and her staff shone brightly. Without the silk wrapping around it, Marion's staff revealed its beautiful appearance. The staff was dark red, and the tip was made of an unknown jade material. It was a pure, beautiful, naked flaming angel. As she roared, the dark red staff in her hands suddenly brightened, and a narrow beam of light flashed from the tip. In the next second, a Demon's Soul guardian that was pouncing towards Duque and Marion was split in half by the blue arcane light. There was no blazing light like the sun, nor was there any sharp light. With just one simple move, the guardian of the Demon's Soul, which was created by the 4 Dragon Kings, was killed. Duque looked at this scene in shock. He finally had a clear understanding of the power of this delicate and seemingly weak female counselor of the Silver Moon Parliament. "Go! I can't hold it for long." Duque's right eyelid twitched. He suddenly realized that the damned flaming puppet had appeared again, roaring and pouncing towards them. This time, Marion used the same trick again, but it didn't get the desired effect. The flaming puppet took the hit head-on, and only paused for a moment before it continued to attack expressionlessly. Marion had to use another powerful spell that Duque didn't know about to destroy the flaming puppet again. Duque gritted his teeth. "Marion, be careful. Hurry up, I can't last long." Marion smiled bitterly. Duque took out the Grand Marshal's battle staff, and flashed deeper into the fortress. Chapter 5:12. At this moment, the atmosphere in the Dalajan Kingdom was extremely strange. "The elites of the Rotterdam have been defeated? Don't be afraid, we still have His Excellency Duke Marcus." "Yes. As long as he's here, we have nothing to fear." A large-scale elite assault battle that could have been recorded in history and surpassed the imagination of mortals had become the biggest joke. Just like how the silly orcs had fought with the humans on the vast sea, only to be killed. Today, the Rotterdam Kingdom had become the biggest joke. More than half of the kingdom's elite knights had been slaughtered in less than an hour. King Tyrrhenus could totally imagine that he would be criticized by the nobles of the Rotterdam Kingdom in the following days. If it was just a simple defeat, it would be fine. If they were to lose, they would lose together. At most, the whole of the Rotterdam Kingdom would suffer together, and everyone would go home to lick their wounds. But Duque had appeared. Duque, who was thought to have died somewhere, actually appeared again, and perfectly used the elites of the Rotterdam Kingdom as bait to lure away a large number of chiefs. What happened to being the leader? How did the great Rotterdam Kingdom become a sacrificial pawn? King Tyrrhenus felt a surge of anger in his chest, and he almost fainted on the spot. Tyrrhenus' face was very, very black, as if he had touched charcoal. His whole body was trembling. Others might think that he was sad about the loss of the elites, but only he knew that he had developed a grudge against a junior that he had always looked down on. Be it Anjouan Lothar or Duke Marcus, these 2 candidates for the commander-in-chief of the alliance were the only way out. Using the noble Lothar as a mascot, and then kicking Duque away when the war was not going well. That was what Tyrrhenus had thought. With these 2 scapegoats, it was only natural for the general of the Rotterdam Kingdom to be promoted to the commander-in-chief of the alliance. Who would have known that Anjouan and Duque worked together perfectly? One controlled the western battlefield, and the other coordinated the entire alliance perfectly, organizing many successful military operations, and expanding the alliance from 8 to 10. Just thinking about it made him mad. In exchange for a compromise, 2 country bumpkins from a remote southern country became the heroes of the alliance. His Rotterdam Kingdom had contributed money, manpower, and effort in exchange for a core position. Look at the way the kings were looking at Tyrrhenus now, they were all mocking him, as if he was an idiot. Tyrrhenus almost wanted to send someone to kill Duque on the spot. But he resisted. Whether it could solve the problem of the Red Dragon Queen was still unknown. If he were to trip Duque up at this juncture, firstly, he would not be able to make it in time, and secondly, the alliance would really collapse. That would not be beneficial to the Rotterdam Kingdom at all. Even though he knew that he was on the verge of losing control, the self-restraint of a veteran politician suppressed his emotional impulses, allowing his intense heartbeat to gradually calm down. It seems that we old bones are still outdated. The future of the alliance still depends on Marcus and the other youngsters. He was no longer upset, no longer agitated. If he did not lose control just a moment ago, everyone would think that Turinas was a kind elder who took care of the younger generation. That's right, Turinas had decided that since he could not suppress Duque, he would kill him by praising him. According to his experience, he would definitely not be able to see through this kind of overt plot. Once he got carried away, it would be the time for him to fall into hell. Turinas' lips curled into a cold smile. Unfortunately, Turinas would definitely fail. Duque was not some ignorant 16-year-old from a small village in Azeroth. Duque had no way of knowing what Turinas was thinking. He did not take the loss of the Rotterdam Kingdom to heart. It was true that the Rotterdam Kingdom's unintentional attack helped him take the bullet. This was definitely unexpected. From the beginning to the end, Duque had never thought of tricking the Rotterdam Kingdom. This was a battle that transcended the mortal world. Why did the small Rotterdam Kingdom come here to interfere? Was it my fault that Turinas was looking for trouble? No. I will not take the blame for this. Duque focused on finding Alexstrasza. From beginning to end, the Red Dragon Queen and the Black Dragon King, the two ancient dragon aspects, were the main focus of this show. Unfortunately, Duque did not know what was going to happen next. As a butterfly that incited the general trend and changed history, Duque had changed too many things. In the original history, because the main force of Orgrim had been destroyed, only the Dragonmaw clan was left to defend Grimbader. In the absence of Zulud, the orc warlock Necros who controlled the demon's soul, used the most idiotic method. He brought a large number of red dragon eggs with him and ran away from Grimbader. Now, the main force of the orcs had not completely collapsed. The horde was still strong, not to mention they had the help of several ancient red dragons. It was unlikely that Necros would run away. So, this was likely to be a tough battle. As expected, Necros came. Silently, an ugly orc's head seemed to be floating in the darkness. The dark blue light that flowed in the darkness reflected half of the old green face that was full of curves. The long facial hair looked like withered grass rooted in the cracked earth. The orc warlock's cheeks were deeply sunken, and the dull luster on his face reminded people of a corpse. Necros pursed his lips tightly. His thick lips seemed to have two sharp stones on them, propping up two openings in his lower jaw, exposing his fangs. His hood was embroidered with demonic incantations, and the shadows that extended from it covered his eye sockets. The deeply sunken eyes emitted a deathly light in the darkness. If not for the fact that he could still feel his breath, Duque would have thought that he had encountered an undead, and not a living orc. Necros spoke in a voice that reminded people of death. His common language was terrible, and Duque could barely understand him. Duke Marcus, the nightmare of the horde. I did not think that you would come. Duque leaned on his staff. To this world, your horde is the nightmare. He. Necros let out a rough and unpleasant laugh. Unfortunately, after today, only one of the two nightmares will remain. Necros was right. The Red Dragon Army was the last card of the horde. After losing the main forces of the Blackstone and Warsong clans, the horde no longer had the upper hand in terms of quantity and quality. And the terrifying military mobilization ability of the Alliance had only just been revealed. Duque curled his lips and imposed a conclusion on this meaningless argument. You die, I live. Chapter 5:13. Ha ha ha. Ignorant human, you don't understand the power and greatness of Demon's soul. That's right, I don't understand. Duque admitted the first half of the sentence. However, he did not say the second half. What I don't understand is how much of the power of Demon's Soul you can use. The predecessor of Demon's Soul was the Dragon's Soul. This was the ultimate move used by the dragons to destroy the invading Burning Legion during the ancient war 10,000 years ago. In order to use this ultimate move, the 4 dragon aspects were tricked by Nethario, who was also a dragon aspect back then. They poured most of their power and more than a third of their souls into it. As for the exact number, no one knew. It could only be deduced from a few words, but it should be a lot. If it were a human, it would be so much that they would not be able to walk steadily. In the worst-case scenario, there would be the Time King Nozdormu's power of time, the Magic King Maligo's power of magic, the Life Queen Alexstrasza's power of life, and the Dream King Isara's secret dream technique. There were 4 supreme powers, and even grasping a tiny bit of any one of them was enough to make any mortal's expression change, let alone all 4 of them at the same time. As long as Necros was a little more powerful, even Anastrian and Antonidas, the 2 breaking dawns, would have to kneel, let alone Radiant Moon mages. Under normal circumstances, if Duque encountered Necros, he would definitely be dead. But Duque was calm. His next words took a turn. "I'm in a hurry. Can you please die?" Duque was very honest. He told him his reason: he was in a hurry. Duque was very polite, and said, "Please." Duque was very annoyed, because the goal of his request was for Necros to die. Then die first. Necros suddenly waved a skull staff that still had faint traces of blood on it, and the space around them trembled. Duque's eyes suddenly narrowed. He looked at the evil staff that was obviously made from the skull of a human mage. Duque suddenly did not want to speak. Neither of them spoke again, but the aftermath of their magic powers suddenly collided in the darkness, causing the surrounding ground to be filled with sand and gravel. With the 2 of them as the center, a storm surged in all directions. At this moment, time seemed to freeze. His surroundings were pitch black, and he was also in a huge semi-enclosed space. It was obviously impossible for outsiders to spy on this place, but the battle here seemed to be the focus of all the eyes in the world. In front of the huge iron gate, Orgrim was charging at the seemingly weak line of defense of Gavin Rad and the others. Not good. Necros was going all out. "Let's kill them all." "That's right." Orgrim panicked. The Red Dragon Army was the tribe's last trump card. They could not afford to lose it. However, if it were any other lineup, it would be impossible for them to resist the attack of him and the tribal chiefs. This lineup was really not bad. After Gavin Rad obtained the power of lightning, his short-term combat ability was already on par with the strongest Holy Knight, Uther. If both sides were to duel and the time limit was 10 minutes, it would definitely be a draw. Of course, if it was overtime, Uther, who had the purer power of Holy Light and could wear down the opponent, would win. Orgrim picked up the Hammer of Destruction, which was connected to his mind, but he still could not defeat Gavin Rad. Most of the other tribal chiefs encountered the same problem. Originally, Kilrog had the chance to heavily injure Abendis, but because of Sasha's arrows, he failed several times. And the duel inside was at its peak right from the start. Necros wanted to kill Duque in an instant. He had to do this. Demon's Soul had never been a godly item that could be connected to its master's mind. Under the modification of the Wings of Death, it had long become the most powerful magic item. The price for such boundless power was vitality. Even though Necros was a beast man with strong vitality, even though he would kill disobedient red dragons and sacrifice them to Demon's Soul, for a terrifying magic item that could wipe out the entire Burning Legion expedition back then, this little bit of vitality was not even enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. Terrifying flames suddenly exploded, and the dark space became as bright as day. It felt like the darkest hell was suddenly surrounded by hundreds of suns. No. It was not just an encirclement. It was like a comet crashing into the ground at high speed. Even Duque himself did not think that he had any hope of surviving. Even Sasha, who was far away from the Iron Gate, could feel the monstrous heat coming from behind her. That was super, super high temperature that could even melt steel in an instant. Sasha's face suddenly turned as white as her beautiful silver hair. No, Duque. Everyone on the Alliance's side was so scared that their faces turned pale. Everyone on the Horde's side looked ecstatic. Necros is actually this strong. Orgrim laughed loudly, trying to use the common language to break Gavinrad's will. Duque is definitely going to die. Bullsh *T. Duque has never lost to you. Gavinrad retorted stubbornly, but it made Orgrim feel terrible. If it were anyone else, they would definitely be dead. But Duque. Ugh, Orgrim's heart skipped a beat. Inside, in the huge empty space, facing the countless fireballs that were the size of small houses, Duque let out a soft sigh. He raised his hand and cast Arcane Impact. Could a simple mid-level spell break through so many fireballs? The answer was, unless there was a miracle, but a miracle happened. The terrifying magic power that seemed to be able to destroy a kingdom's capital couldn't tear through that small ball of purplish-blue arcane energy. How is this possible? Necros shouted in shock. Almost instantly, the fireballs in front of him exploded like balloons that had been pierced by needles. It wasn't just the fireballs. Even the magic shield that he had sacrificed countless void devils in exchange for crumbled under Duke's arcane impact, like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Then, Necros watched helplessly as the magic he had shot out with the power of Demon's Soul at the critical moment suddenly distorted and dissipated under the impact of the seemingly ordinary magic power. Not only that, but even the condensed magic power in his body suddenly disappeared. Bam! Arcane Impact wasn't a terrifying fire-type spell. After being hit directly, Necros didn't immediately turn into charcoal, but he was still sent flying. Blood spurted out of his mouth in midair before he finally fell limply onto the cold, rough ground with a thud. All the ribs in his chest must have been broken. No, how can? Necros' eyes widened. Chapter 5:14. Necros could no longer stand up. His eyes were still filled with endless horror and disbelief. He had never thought that as a high-grade warlock with the demon's soul in his hands, he would be killed in seconds one day. After spitting out his last 3 words, Necros died. No orc could survive such an injury, unless there was a high-grade shaman next to him. Necros used to be a shaman, but after using the demon's soul, he became a warlock through and through. He might have countless life-saving skills, but unfortunately, under Duque's surprise attack, he couldn't use any of them. Blood flowed out of Necros' limp body and melted in the darkness. At this time, he saw the system prompt from the wings of death, attack the wielder of the demon's soul, my power will protect you. The corners of Duque's mouth curled up into a smug smile. Duque's voice sounded faintly, F***CK, would there be a backdoor for a magic artifact that Nazario made himself? Back then, Nazario had tricked the 4 dragon aspects. As cunning as he was, he definitely wouldn't put himself in danger. Hence, the demon's soul could seriously affect the other 4 dragon aspects, but it definitely wouldn't affect the black dragon bloodline. Nazario had said that his power was protecting Duque, but to put it bluntly, the pendant contained his scales. Any power that came from the demon's soul would be rendered useless when it came into contact with the power in his scales. This feeling was like a college entrance examination in India. The examinees were taking the exam inside, and a large group of parents crawled outside the exam building to pass their children a cheat sheet. Well, the invigilator even treated the parents who were blocking the light outside the window as air. Thinking of this, even Duque, who had a vested interest in this, had a few words in his mind, legal cheating. An official hack. Do you understand? Just like that, the orc warlock Necros, who was clearly stronger, was killed by Duque in a second. At this moment, Necros' death directly alarmed everyone outside the Iron Gate. Everyone could see that the complicated incantations that were originally climbing like vines outside the Iron Gate receded like the tide. Once upon a time, this place was an absolute forbidden area for the beast men. Even if the great chieftain Orgrim wanted to come, he would need Necros to lead the way. Otherwise, even his powerful fire resistance wouldn't be able to save him. Now, even a fool would know that something had happened to Necros. Otherwise, such a change wouldn't have occurred. Long live Duque! Even though there were only 7 or 8 people left, the alliance suddenly burst into thunderous cheers. Hiss! At this moment, all the beast men in the surroundings couldn't help but gasp, and their rugged and ruthless faces revealed horrified expressions. How long had it been since Duque and the female elven mage entered? Such a short time was only enough for them to reach Necros. After all, it took Necros 3 months to build this place into an impenetrable fortress. Orgrim clearly remembered his assistant, Zulu Cid, telling him that even Dan at his peak would have to kneel, let alone the weak mages of the Alliance. Necros was the demon god here. What kind of joke was this? What kind of trash demon god was this? He was actually killed in one move. Was Necros bluffing? No. Impossible. This wasn't the first time that Necros had personally killed disobedient young red dragons here. Then, did this mean that Duque was too strong? What kind of terrifying efficiency was this? What kind of terrifying power was this? It wasn't just the beast men who were enemies. All the human knights guarding the Iron Gate were also extremely shocked. Forcing Orgrim away with a powerful lightning hammer, Gavinrad raised his hammer high and laughed loudly. Do you see this? Damned greenskins. This is the power of the greatest hero in the history of the Alliance, Duke Marcus. Just as the morale of the horde began to drop, Orgrim laughed out loud as well. Foolish humans. You don't even know what's controlling the Red Dragon Queen. That thing is called the demon's soul. Only warlocks who can control the power of demons can use it. As a mage, Duque can't use it at all. Ha 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 ha. Without the order to remove the restraints, the Red Dragon Queen will never be freed. Of course, you can also try to kill that humanoid female lizard and then taste the anger of the entire Red Dragon army. Thousands of elites had died, and more than 10,000 had died in the rear. So much manpower and resources had been wasted, and in the end, it was all for nothing. This time, it was the Alliance's turn to be at a loss. Several people were instantly stunned, and some were even almost killed by the enemy. Suddenly, Sasha's voice sounded. Don't believe him. If he could solve it directly, Duque could have done it in 2 days. He delayed for so many days, and only yesterday did he personally tell me that all the cards are finally gathered. Finally gathered? If it were anyone else, no one would have believed such words. But the person who spoke was Duque, the most outstanding strategist in the entire alliance, a wise man who liked to plan before taking action. If he dared to say such words, then it must be true. Orgrim looked at the battlefield in disbelief. He looked at the powerhouses of the alliance who were at a great disadvantage but had high morale. The chief's expression was indescribable. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, and his fangs seemed to be chattering. His eyes were filled with disbelief, as if he was in a dream. How could one person's prestige reach such a level? Orgrim had longed for this for a long time, but had never been able to reach it. Yet, his old enemy had reached it. It had to be said that it was ironic. Kill them. We still have a chance. Orgrim roared. Just then, a shining golden Gundam, oh, no, a paladin suddenly smashed through the ceiling and descended from the sky. When he landed, the hard tiles around him cracked inch by inch. Sand and pebbles flew everywhere, and it was a mess. Go. Ask me first, Wother. The Alliance's strongest paladin had arrived. On the other side, Duque quickly ran over and searched Necro's corpse. It didn't take him much effort to find a platinum-colored disc hanging from the Beastman Warlock's waist. System notification, you have found the God-tier magic device Demon's Soul. Almost as soon as Duque's finger touched Demon's Soul, the image around him suddenly became clear. It was as if an invisible hand had lifted the black cover covering the entire room, revealing the situation inside the huge cave. This was a huge cave that could fit at least 2 Boeing 777 airliners. Duque didn't expect the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza to be less than 30 feet away from him. Chapter 5:15. This wasn't the first time Duque and the Red Dragon Queen had met. They had met once before after the Battle of Karazhan. At that time, Duque was completely focused on the death of Medivh and didn't have the time to carefully examine this legendary dragon queen who had existed throughout almost all of Azeroth's history. Even though Duque had seen Alexstrasza in the game, his impression of the queen's human form was still very vague. Duque suddenly found that he couldn't take it anymore. The person in front of him was so sexy that it was against the rules. In his field of view, Alexstrasza was chained to the ground by a small iron chain. Her feet were facing Duque, and her body was facing inward. From this angle, the first thing he saw was a pair of long legs that were different from the slender and long legs of the elves. They were full of strength and beauty. They were the same long legs that gave people the feeling that they wouldn't break no matter how much they played with them. Further in, because of the angle of view and the fact that the queen was only wearing a pantsuit, the view was dominated by her perky buttocks. The smooth and large curve formed a perfect arc. It was snow-white and full, and at first glance, one could feel that it was full of firm elasticity. The queen's right hand was on the ground, and her left hand was behind her waist. She was half bent, inadvertently forming a standard S shape. From this angle, as the line of sight moved, one could immediately see the eye-catching and proud peaks on the buttocks. The towering peaks were like climbing a towering mountain, and then immediately had to look up at an even higher peak. The firm and proud peaks, matched with the red and gold-rimmed breastplate, looked even more sexy and charming, like a red lotus in full bloom. Looking at it again, it was an angry oval face full of a strong exotic style. It was clearly a standard female elf face template, but the noble aura that was still revealed even under torture and defilement made it even more indescribably sexy. However, in her proud figure, there were a few criminal accessories. On her jade-like feet, there was a shiny black iron shackle around her ankles, and there was an evil metal collar around her slender neck. A long iron chain hung down from her neck, passing between her breasts and reaching the ground. This was basically hinting to Duque that if he really wanted to do something to the queen, Alexstrasza would definitely be unable to resist. Is this the so-called queen's temptation? How could I, Duque, be such a shameless person? What locked room play? What bondage training play? I won't do something so shameless. I am the righteous and reliable Lang Jun, the Duque with the highest moral integrity in the world. Ha ha ha. Facing the queen who was looking back at him, Duque revealed a lecherous smile. If there were no mistakes, the moral integrity inherited from Medivh would be added to his body in 21 seconds. Hypocrisy would activate. His smile would also instantly rise from the level of a pervert to the level of a saint. Yes, the plan worked. However, a gust of cold wind blew over, and with a whoosh, nothing happened. Something seemed to be wrong. The lecher was still the same lecher. Something didn't seem right. Duque quickly asked the system elf in his mind, Hey. Where did my integrity go? Hurry. Waiting online. Integrity. Host, do you have such a thing? The system elf replied seriously. If its voice wasn't so rigid, perhaps it wouldn't have such a fatal effect. But it was precisely this sort of tone that seemed to be speaking nonsense in a serious manner that caused Duke's chest to feel as if it was split open by something. Moral integrity was like a ball. Throw it out, pick it back up. Throw it out, pick it back up. Throw it out, wait, do I have such a thing as integrity? Damn it. This joke isn't funny at all. Duque angrily flipped the table in his mind, I'm talking about human nature. The human nature that Medivh gave me. The system elf immediately came to a realization, It's long gone. You've been cursed for 15 days, and you're losing your humanity, integrity, every day. In addition, you've just used the soul-corroding power of the wings of death. The humanity, integrity, that you inherited from Medivh has been completely lost. Right now, your soul power is 100, and your humanity happens to be 100%. Pfft. In the mind world, Duque vomited 300 liters of blood. Alright, life is like a drama. If you don't have integrity, acting skills will save you. Watch how I, the best actor, Duque, reverse the situation. Duque's face almost changed as he put away the frivolous smile on his lips. When he focused his attention on the pair of inhuman red horns on Alexstrasza's head, he kept saying to himself, "She's not human. She's not human. Her horns are so cute. Pft, pft, pft. What am I thinking?" However, just as Duque was about to say something, the Red Dragon Queen spoke first. Her voice revealed a clear sense of grievance, and it sounded like she was scolding, "Duque, why are you only here now?" The slightly magnetic voice had the typical style of a queen, but it also sounded like a lover coquettishly saying, "Damn you, why are you only here now?" Ah! Duque swallowed his saliva, and then instinctively felt that something was wrong. Suddenly, the voice of Deathwing sounded in Duque's ears. "What are you hesitating for? Recite the spell I taught you and liberate Her Majesty the Red Dragon Queen." At the same time, a sentence emerged in Duque's mind. It was not Nisario's voice, but Duque's own voice. "What are you thinking about? Recite the spell, so that Alexstrasza will become your slave forever. You can have the most beautiful queen in the world and control eternal life. You can also command the entire Red Dragon army, sweep the world, and be crowned king." The Red Dragon Queen in front of him had a coquettish expression on her face. She was more charming than all the female protagonists in all the romance movies that Duque had watched on his computer before he transmigrated. Alexstrasza did not know what happened to Duque at first. She was overjoyed when she saw that Necros, who should have died 1,000,000 times, was killed by Duque in one move. "Oh Titan! You're the one who saved me. Thank you. Duque, hurry up and untie me. I don't want to stay in this damn place for one more second." Duque was unexpectedly silent, revealing a perverted look. But the queen did not care. "Quick! Quick! Quick! My compatriots and I are absolutely happy to roast every living orc in the world with our dragon breath. Do you want any more rewards? Don't worry, I've saved so many treasures from ancient times until today that you can't even imagine them." "Alright, since you saved me, I can share some with you," Alexstrasza said with a pained expression. Something unexpected happened again. Like a pervert, Duque pounced on her directly. Then, just as his hands were about to touch the queen's pair of giant cats, he suddenly pulled out Demon's Soul with his right hand and took out a strange accessory with his left hand, wanting to smash it on Demon's Soul. At the same moment, a cold male figure suddenly appeared behind Duque. Chapter 5:16. Cunning brat, do you think you can fool me? Accompanied by the casual and contemptuous words, this ghost-like black-haired man waved his hand lightly, and Duque died. It was not that Duque did not try to resist. Unfortunately, the light of his resistance was so dim, as laughable as a firefly trying to compete with the sun. Ice Barrier was activated at the very end. He was just an inch away from turning Duque into ashes with the black flames he had casually waved out. However, the powerful defense constructed by the ice elements still protected Duque, for more than a second. Just like in the future, the invincibility of a paladin and the ice barrier of a mage could be dispelled. In the face of a higher and more condensed power, the so-called absolute defense was just a joke. How could a mere Morningstar mage like Duque be able to resist the power of the Deathwing, Nisario, who was at the peak of power in the world of Azeroth? Duque was dead. He was killed in an instant without any suspense. Right in front of Alexstrasza. The poor Red Dragon Queen had just thought that she could regain her freedom. She did not expect to see the dawn of hope, only to find that it was just a prelude to a darker nightmare. No. Saw. Re. Oh. Alexstrasza was furious. She was really angry. With incomparable grief and indignation, and with the grievances she had suffered for months, she roared angrily at Nesario. However, it was of no use. Necro's death only meant that the demon's soul had temporarily lost its master. This did not mean that the shackles on her had been lifted. She could only look up at the high and mighty Nesario pitifully and desperately like a weak woman who could be ravaged 10,000 times at any time. Nesario, no, he should now be called Deathwing, appeared in human form. His entire face was still shrouded in a gloomy black fog. The only thing that could be seen was his pair of eyes that were full of contempt. Hee hee. Well, I really didn't expect that you, who are known as the most beautiful in the dragon realm, would actually fall to such a state. You've really opened my eyes, Alexstrasza. Nesario. The queen gritted her teeth. Don't call me that name. With a light shout, a strong wind was stirred up in the huge cave. The queen's long, fiery red hair was blown straight by the strong wind. After the rage, Deathwing's voice became gentle again. He stretched out his left hand with sharp nails, grabbed the queen's chin, and twisted her up. Spit. The queen directly spat a mouthful of fragrant foam towards Deathwing. However, that mouthful of saliva suddenly stopped in midair, and in the next instant, it vanished without a trace. Originally I wanted to send this filthy thing back to your face, but that would be a blasphemy to all dragons. So thank me, dear Alexstrasza. The black dragon king's sharp claws rubbed against the queen's delicate face, easily scraping out bloody scars. The queen's face was disfigured, but she instantly healed the scars. As the life-giver, as long as her power was not completely exhausted, her regenerative abilities were almost limitless. But, the red dragon queen was trembling violently. Are you touched? I'm not interested in you. As long as I get what I want, it doesn't matter if you become a lowly orc slave or a despicable human plaything. Hee hee hee. Shaking Alexstrasza off, Nesario walked towards the back. There were a few huge dragon eggs that were blooming with a crimson glow. However, the power of the flames wrapped around the dragon eggs had almost been extinguished. The light was like a candle that was about to go out, and could no longer protect these dragon eggs. Bang! Nesario waved his hand, and suddenly, the last protection on the dragon eggs shattered. At this moment, she understood everything. Why did the demon's soul, which had been missing for nearly 10,000 years, suddenly appear? Why did this terrifying magic artifact that specialized in restraining dragons suddenly fall into the hands of the orcs? Why did the orcs find her so perfectly and inexplicably capture her? Why did the orcs so cleverly use all kinds of mental and physical torture to reduce her resistance and make more red dragons obey the tribe's orders? Then, why did Duque come to rescue her? There was an answer to all of these questions. Only the dragon aspect understood the dragon aspect the best. From the beginning to the end, it was all Nesario's plot. And his ultimate goal was her dragon eggs. Nesario probably wanted to use her dragon eggs to hatch the most evil and incredible new type of evil dragon that obeyed his orders. Alexstrasza shouted in despair, "No, don't touch them." Nesario did not stop. He sneered as he continued his movements. The queen was in despair. She was choking. Tears of sadness welled up in her eyes. Who will save me? Save my child that might be born. I'm willing to give up everything for this. It was as if the heavens had heard her prayers in the darkest of despair. A miracle had really happened. Right in front of Nesario, an emerald green light suddenly bloomed. Was that a portal? The next moment, Deathwing's movements suddenly became sluggish, as if his entire body had been forcibly pulled into slow motion. Following that, a blue radiance shot out from the green portal and sent Deathwing flying. Boom! The surging magic power directly blasted him to the top of the cave. It turned his entire body into a cannonball, piercing through the underground rock stratum of the entire grim battle fortress and blasting into the sky. Three unfamiliar yet familiar figures appeared beside Alexstrasza. Although her eyes were covered by tears, she could not recognize these people for a moment. This did not hinder her from sensing who they were by their aura. Izura. Nozdorm. Maligos. Izura smiled and nodded, then sighed. Sorry, we can't touch that thing either. It's more important to deal with Nesario now. That's right, the dragon aspect had shot themselves in the foot. Back then, there were not many intelligent life forms on planet Azeroth other than the dragon race. Therefore, after they realized that they could not destroy the demon's soul, they set up a spell that no dragon or dragon descendant could use. Now, they could only watch helplessly as the thing was placed in front of them, but the three dragon aspects could not do anything about it. They could not even save their companions. This was definitely ironic. After saying that, the three human-like fellows nodded at the same time and disappeared in an instant. In the next second, the terrifying roars of four dragon aspects rang out in the sky. A 3v1 dragon aspect battle had begun. Chapter 5:17. The pitiful red dragon queen could only wait for the next person who was qualified to use Demon's Soul to judge her fate. Silence. Dead silence. The queen's chest rose and fell with rapid breathing. As expected, did I still have too much hope? Alright, I shouldn't have asked too much of Duque. Who's next? No matter who it is, as long as they can truly free me, I swear I'll treat them well. Abandon the high and mighty dignity of the dragon race. Treat them well. Alexstrasza's mind was in a mess. Her fate was in someone else's hands. It didn't feel good to be hovering between hope and despair, heaven and hell. But she had to wait. She didn't expect to see Marion Firewing, a high-ranking elven magician. Marion walked in as cleanly and elegantly as if she was taking a stroll in her own garden. I am the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. Quick! Release me, save me. Like a drowning person who couldn't swim, the queen instinctively asked for help when she saw the emblem of the Alliance and the Silver Moon Council on Marion's chest. For thousands of years, the Red Dragon Army had a good relationship with the Silver Moon Council. At this moment, Marion smiled. It was a proud smile, with an unbridled feeling that was infinitely close to madness. The female elf who was smiling like a flower gave the queen a terrible ominous feeling. Save you? Who said I'm going to save you? Marion asked with an extremely cold smile, pushing the queen's heart into a bottomless abyss again. She had already fallen into the 18th level of hell. Who would have thought that there was another one at the bottom? 36 levels of hell. Are you afraid? The Red Dragon Queen's voluptuous body trembled. In the eyes of men, this might be an original sin of temptation. Unfortunately, in the eyes of the same sex, this was a sin. In Marion's eyes, there was clear jealousy. Dragons are so good. Eternal life in the true sense, eternal beauty, eternal youth. Back then, the eternal life of my night elf compatriots was also bestowed by you, wasn't it? Your Majesty, the giver of life. She seemed to be murmuring to herself, but it made the queen's heart colder. Who are you? Who are you loyal to? Whoosh, it really is, Demon's Soul. Marion walked to the place where Duque had died and picked up the platinum disc. Remember your new master's name. Mother Dragon. My name is Marion Firewing. Ha ha ha. Alexstrasza's beautiful face was flushed with anger, but before she had time to feel sad, she began to feel the soul torture from the demon's soul. The pain of having his heart pierced by countless needles was something he was unable to adapt to. You're a warlock. You're one of Nesario's men. Not just any Tom, Dick, or Harry could use the demon's soul. Only warlocks could operate this terrifying demonic artifact. In less than a second, Marion could clearly feel her life force fading away. With a wave of her hand, a mirror, made of ice appeared beside her. Marion could clearly see the wrinkles that appeared on her face. Anger flashed across her face, and she immediately laughed. That orc warlock is really an idiot. He actually put his own life force into it. If he knew that you created the world tree. Ha 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 ha. The queen's expression was terrible. The high elves were not outsiders like the orcs. They were not so easy to fool. However, as a queen, she instinctively refused to be dominated by Marion. Alexstrasza gritted her teeth. You actually want to be my master? Ha! Do you think Nesario will let you go? Nesario? Ha ha ha. Although he disguised himself well, the long years had made him forget one thing. The dragon's soul itself was designed with the 5 dragon aspects as the standard. Marion softly chanted an incantation, and the platinum-colored disc immediately changed. The disc was divided into 5 equal regions, 4 of which were radiating with a bright radiance. The queen immediately realized what Marion wanted to do. Wahahaha. Yes. As long as I put the scale that contains Nesario's soul and power into the demon's soul, even the famous Deathwing will become my slave. When that happens, the 5 colored dragons will crawl at my feet. I will no longer be a mere Silvermoon counselor, I will be the queen of the entire world of Azeroth. Ha 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 ha, Marion laughed wildly. Her laughter was so crazy and unrestrained that it drained the blood from Alexstrasza's face. Everything was clear. Whether it was her capture or the Red Dragon Legion being controlled, most of it was a conspiracy of Deathwing. However, as Deathwing's backup, as the one who was truly trusted by Deathwing, and as the agent to control the other 4-colored dragons, Marion had chosen to betray Deathwing for some reason. In any case, the artifact, Dragon's Soul, which the dragon aspects had created to repel the Burning Legion, had really shot themselves in the foot this time. The queen was not optimistic about Marion controlling Nesario through the demon's soul. Because it depended on how much of Nesario's soul she got. If it was less than 10%, the evil Black Dragon King would probably kill Marion even if it meant the soul backlash. Once 1/3 of the soul was injected like the 4 dragon aspects, control would be inevitable. And it would involve the entire race. At this moment, Marion was suddenly attacked without a sound. Break! 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 4 emerald green arrows suddenly appeared in the air less than a palm away from Marion. Unfortunately, that was the end. The arrowheads were stuck in the air by some mysterious force, unable to move an inch. It was only then that an oval magic shield wrapped around Marion appeared in everyone's field of vision. Oh! Marion slowly turned around and looked at the female ranger behind her with a bow. It's you. Windsor Windrunner. It was Windsor. Realizing that something was wrong, she left the front line to Gavin Rad and the others and followed them like crazy. Let me ask you. Where is in? The usually beautiful and quiet Windsor now had unconcealable anger and excitement. Even her arms, which should not have trembled, were obviously shaking. Marion smiled wickedly. He's dead. The person who killed him was Deathwing. After saying that, she pointed at the Grand Marshal's combat staff, on the ground that was blackened by the flames. When Windsor came in, it was not that she did not see the blackened head of the staff, but when she suddenly heard the news and saw Alexstrasza's depressed expression, Windsor suddenly felt dizzy. No. Chapter 518. The Grand Marshal's staff wasn't an ornament from a noble's house. It represented the Dalajan's highest magical achievement. Sasha clearly remembered that even if she shot an arrow, the staff's magic power would deflect it. But now, it lay quietly on the ground. There was a deathly still scorch on the ground with the point of impact as the center. It wasn't an ordinary fire, but a terrifying flame that could burn everything. Even the rock stratum itself was destroyed. The magic surrounding the burn marks was so dense that it couldn't be fooled. Sasha felt like she was about to collapse. She suddenly recalled all the times she'd spent with Duque. The miraculous things he'd done after appearing as her future brother-in-law, turning trash into treasure, modifying the storm altar, repelling an army with a single banner, saving Lordaeron City from a desperate crisis, and saving the Red Dragon Queen despite being cursed with death. Of course, what touched Sasha the most was that he'd saved her from the terrifying dragon breath. Nothing was more touching than a man who could be relied on at the most crucial moment. Just as she thought she could understand this future brother-in-law, he'd been captured by the wings of death. They'd finally reunited, and they hadn't even exchanged a few words. Who knew it would be an eternal farewell? I want you to be roasted in the flames of hell for 10,000 years. With a furious roar, Sasha disappeared from where she stood. In the next second, in the huge, pitch-black cave, sharp arrows were suddenly shot at them from all directions. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. There was a continuous stream of steel arrows. There was a silent elven wooden arrow. There was also the nimble power of wind. However, everything was resolved by the pair of gigantic flaming wings behind Marion. The wings were over 2 meters long. It was as if they had a life of their own. With a light flick, at least 3 arrows would be reduced to ashes. Ha ha ha. Too weak. You're really too weak. With your strength, you can't even make me move half a step. And you want to kill me? Ha ha ha. With her left hand on her waist and the platinum disc in her hand, Marion placed her right elbow on the back of her left hand and propped up her chin. Marion gazed at the darkness with a devilish gaze, as though Sasha was right in front of her. Humph. Gritting her teeth, Sasha activated aimed shot. Aimed shot was the ranger's most powerful skill. Corresponding to its power, it was an ultimate skill that needed to be charged up. In a battle like this, exposing one's position was definitely disadvantageous for a ranger. The explosive power of a high-ranked mage was far greater than that of a ranger. What Sasha was betting on was Marion's arrogance. Even though she did not want to say it out loud, she had to admit that the difference in strength between the two of them was too great. If Aurelia was here, she might be able to suppress Marion. However, Sasha, whose damage had not been polarized, could not think of any other skills other than aimed shooting that could blast through the protection of that pair of strange flame wings. Sasha knew that Marion was trying to destroy her ultimate move and deal her a heavy blow, but when she thought of Duque, who had turned into ashes, her tears flowed uncontrollably. Duque. Bless me to kill him, hee hee. She still did not move. Marion looked down at the arrow that had gathered all of Sasha's power as it shot towards her, as if she was looking at an ant. And then, there was no then. The raging flames easily burned the entire arrow. Let's end this. Marion raised her left hand lightly, her index finger forming an elegant arc with her arm. Even this light finger of hers was bewitching. A huge fireball instantly formed at her fingertip. In the next second, the huge fireball would shoot out and blast Sasha into ashes. Just at this moment, Marion suddenly felt the sound of wind behind her head. Who? Alexstrasza. Turning around, she saw the dumbfounded queen. It was obvious that the queen was looking in the direction of, behind me. Instinctively, Marion activated the power of, Demon's Soul. Unfortunately, she had made the same mistake as a certain stupid orc warlock. The surging evil flames were easily popped like soap bubbles. A brick made of ice appeared out of thin air. It was grabbed by a swinging arm and slammed down like lightning. Marion's own magic shield took effect. The moment it took effect, an arcane energy that wasn't very strong, but was sharp as a needle, easily pierced through her shield. In the end. Paw! Fresh blood dripped down from her forehead, quickly staining Marion's bewitching face. Hee hee. No matter how strong Pharaoh is, he'll be knocked down in one move. Marion fainted with a brick while humming something that others couldn't understand. Who was that guy? Naturally, it was our Duque. That signature evil smirk, that face that deserved a beating after succeeding in his scheme, Sasha would be able to recognize him even if he turned into ashes. Duque? Duque? The first voice was the queen's, and the second was naturally Sasha's. Yes. Duque replied to Sasha with a smile as he dealt with Marion. It's not auspicious to kill a sister. Therefore, Duque fitted Marion with the spellbreaker shackles that he got from Kuel Salis. This thing was mainly used to destroy the circulation of magic power in the magic circuits of the human body. For a regular person, this thing was no different from regular shackles. For a mage, it was enough to turn a high-level mage into a weak girl who couldn't even truss a chicken. As a gentleman, he would be letting himself down if he didn't use tortoise shackles. But with two important ladies present, Duque just cuffed Marion's joints behind her back. Duque? Sasha even dropped her bow and walked over in disbelief. Yes, what's wrong? Duque? Sasha's tone became even more intense. Duque blinked. Didn't your sister tell you that I know true mirror image? Duque continued to spout nonsense. Mirror image my ass. He really couldn't take it anymore and was instantly killed by the wings of death. Looking at the system notification that he had 90% soul power and 90% moral integrity, Duque was crying in his heart. But to prevent Sasha from worrying, he could only continue to pretend to be strong. Duque? Is it really you? Looking at Sasha, whose eyes were blurry and glistened with tears, Duque knew that things weren't so simple. Duque sighed. It's really me. If you don't believe me, come and touch me. Duque, from shock to surprise, and then to ecstasy, when all the grievances and fear in her heart poured out, Sasha finally did something that not only Duque didn't expect, but she also didn't expect. Sasha pounced on Duque and pushed him to the ground. Then, she closed her eyes and kissed him deeply. Chapter 5:19. There was something in this world called taboo. As an old fool on Mount Akina, it was Duque's dream to have the legendary sisters. But on the other hand, as a young man of the new era, Duque had told himself countless times to just wash up and sleep. At first, Duque didn't have any special feelings for Sasha. At most, he felt that the three Windrunner sisters were very pretty. Life was always full of surprises. Saving someone had accidentally opened up Sasha's heart. There were some things that happened naturally, like water flowing into a canal, Being kissed by a beauty that he liked was a blissful thing. Now that he had lost his moral integrity, he couldn't count on Duque to become a saint. Duque's eyes widened. He was stunned for less than half a second before he shamefully obeyed. The boss of the Jiangnan tannery ran away with his sister-in-law. Then cough. One of Duke's stiff arms gently went through the silver hair and held onto the back of Sasha's head, while the other wrapped around her waist that had been through a lot of training. In that instant, Duke clearly felt Sasha's body stiffen for a moment. Then, not only from her face, but also from her breasts, waist, and thighs that were pressed close to him. He could clearly feel the heat rising. But the kiss didn't stop. A smooth, fragrant tongue came over and tangled with a certain someone's tongue. Their heavy breaths intersected, accompanied by soft murmurs. Things seemed to be progressing in a wonderful direction at a high speed. Unfortunately, before their passion was fully ignited, it was interrupted. It was the roar of an ancient dragon guardian. Damn it. You two are purposely making me angry, aren't you? Definitely on purpose, right? Duque, are you going to let me out or not? I'll count to 3. If you don't let me out, I'll go crazy. The passionate kiss stopped, and their lips parted. Looking at the silver line connecting their lips, Sasha suddenly blushed. The next second, she bounced up as if she had been electrocuted. She sat on Duque's lap, not knowing what to do. Duque was annoyed. 1, 2, 3. All right, I'm done counting. Why don't you go crazy? In the face of Duque's fierce gaze, Alexstrasza actually cowered. All right, just say it. Are you here to save me or not? Or are you going to learn from those two shameless fellows and enslave me, making me do all kinds of strange things? Something strange? Duque blinked. You mean what you did with this silver-haired elf? The queen covered her chest with her hands, which was a rare sight. Pfft. Duque choked. Damn you. I'm not interested in you, okay? If you care so much, why are you wearing a bikini armor? You might as well wrap yourself up into a seed. Why do you need to transform into a human form? There were so many things to complain about. Duque was so angry that he didn't want to scold her anymore. Sasha was so embarrassed that she wanted to die. In his excitement, he had forgotten about the presence of the Red Dragon Queen. Now that he thought about it, he just wanted to find a place to hide and not see what was happening outside. Duke's forehead was full of black lines, and he held his forehead. All right, if it's to save you, I will save you. Let me ask you something. Have you developed any thoughts of revenge against society or going against humanity because of the long period of torture? The queen raised the shackles on her hands. If you don't unchain me, I'll really get angry. Then what do I get out of saving you? You do. If you delay any longer and something happens to my siblings, there won't be any. Sasha gaped as she watched Duque haggle with the famous ancient dragon like a peddler. She couldn't connect Duque to that great hero of the alliance at all. Actually, it wasn't Duque's fault. Because of the curse, the integrity he had inherited from Medivh was gone. Now, Duque had become that unprincipled, animal-like transmigrator again. All right, one last request. I'll say it through the mental connection. Duque gently pointed his finger between the queen's brows. Then, the two of them quickly exchanged their conditions and opinions. This wasn't a problem at first. However, Duque underestimated Alexstrasza, who was one of the top figures in this world. Even though it was a superficial exchange of consciousness, the queen still secretly peeked at a part of Duque's memory. Duque didn't know. The mental barrier he had created with the system was still trying to resist Nesario's mental corruption. All right, it's time to end this. Duque picked up Demon's Soul. At this moment, Sasha picked up her bow again. She stared at the unconscious Marion and spread her senses. On the other side, the queen was also watching Duque nervously. She had had enough of the torture. Her little heart had long been broken and mended, and she really couldn't take any more fright. Because of the chains, she had to kneel on the ground like a pilgrim worshipping. She looked up at Duque and stared at Duque's every move. Cautiously, Duque took out the accessory that Nesario had given him. A wave of arcane energy gathered in his hand. With a crisp bang, the glass used as a disguise shattered and dissipated, revealing the real thing inside. It was a scale in the shape of a water droplet, with a fiery and evil aura. There seemed to be a small black dragon roaring angrily on the scale, as if blaming Duque for not acting according to his evil script. Looking at the platinum-colored disc, Duque used the black scale to draw a huge arc on the surface of the demonic creature. The scales of the wings of death were like a knife cutting through butter, easily cutting through the hard golden surface of the demon's soul. 1 area, 2 areas, 3 areas, 4 areas. When the 4 glowing areas were all cut open, Xian's eyes lit up. Windsor let out a scream. Be careful. She pulled Duque away in time, only to see that demon's soul was already floating in the air, and the long arc-shaped incision began to violently spew out a strong light with 4 colors: green, representing the emerald dream; red, representing the life-giver; bronze, representing the controller of time; and blue, representing the supreme power of magic. Duque could clearly feel the huge amount of energy surging out of the cracked magic artifact. He knew that he had to act quickly, or the energy would dissipate forever and be lost in the wind of grim battle fortress. Le Ducasai, he chanted the incantation from the Red Dragon Queen. He used almost all the computing power of the system to constantly adjust the spell. He was fully focused. He didn't want anyone to make a mistake at such a critical moment. This was not only the incantation to liberate the Red Dragon Queen, but it was also one of the most important factors in the entire course of history. The 4 colors began to blend together, forming a strange rainbow. It flashed and rose at high speed, passing through the rock formation and flying into the sky. Chapter 520. The bloody battle in front of the huge iron gate had reached its most brutal state. Roars, curses, and the sounds of heavy weapons clashing were the strongest sounds on the battlefield. Due to the aftermath of the intense battle, many of the torches' bases had been destroyed. The light in the tunnel gradually dimmed, and the torches that had fallen to the ground emitted the last bit of heat before they were extinguished. How long had this bloody battle lasted? How many of these savage green-skinned monsters were there? Where did they come from? What kind of strength did they have? Would Duque, who had entered the Iron Gate, succeed? If they succeeded, how many of the people guarding here would be able to survive? Everything had already become a blur, as the people guarding the Iron Gate were already mentally numb. They instinctively waved the weapons in their hands, inhaling more of the bloody air with every breath they took. With every exhale, they let out the loudest roars they could muster. The chaotic wind in the tunnel blew at Uther's ear-length hair, and his brown hair swept across his cheeks. Unlike the other warriors whose eyes were bloodshot from the fierce battle, his most devout faith made him far more tranquil than the others. Uther's mouth was shouting the most majestic of slogans, but his ears were pricked up. It was as if he was standing and listening to a human epic being recited by a bard. The origins were long and magnificent. It was like a long wind that crossed the barriers of time and space, bringing the ideals of their distant ancestors and their wills to this place. In a daze, Uther saw countless illusory knights appear beside him, fighting side by side with them. Even though their faces were blurry, he could clearly see that they were humans. He suddenly understood who they were. Ancestors, kings, and all the heroic spirits who had fought for humanity. The Morning Star wizard behind Uther, Ronan, was unexpectedly powerful. With the support of an almost limitless amount of magic crystals, his violent arcane magic poured out in torrents in the entire tunnel. Any orc below the level of a chief would be instantly killed if they were hit by his magic. It was a pity that there were just too many orcs. For some reason, Uther thought of 2,800 years ago, when humans had just obtained magic power. A man raised his sword in front of the knights and said, "I swear on this sword that humans will bear the grace of the high elves and establish an eternal covenant. We will wipe out all evil creatures and give civilization and hope to the truly intelligent races. My people, my children, my grandchildren, will pass on my oath until the end of the world." More than 2,800 years ago, the flag of the Arather Empire was raised on the battlefield of the Arthi Highlands, reflecting the dawn of that day. Humans and high elves joined forces to fight against the green trolls. 2,800 years later, it was as if 3,000 years of history had overlapped. Humans and elves joined hands once again, but this time, their enemies had changed from the green-skinned trolls to the green-skinned orcs. 2,800 years ago, we had Thoradin the Great. Now, where is our new Thoradin the Great? While Wuther was talking to himself, the battle had reached its climax. The number of humans still standing in front of the Iron Gate could be counted on two hands. The nameless knights had all died in battle. But in front of them, there was still a sea of orc elites. Suddenly, a strange feeling that shook the entire stronghold surged towards everyone, covering the sky and covering the earth. Roar! From the deepest part of Grim Battle Fortress, a loud and clear roar came from within. It was the roar of a dragon. It was the roar of the life-giver, the red dragon Queen Alexstrasza. The roar was filled with complicated emotions. There were almost all kinds of emotions. Sadness, displeasure, resentment, hatred, but most of all, joy. Joy for freedom. Joy for breaking free from the cage. And anger towards the enemy. An ominous feeling spread through every orc, as if the sky was about to fall on them. Not good. Could it be? Before Orgrim could finish, the huge iron gate suddenly opened. From the dark and deep hole, a magical light suddenly flashed like daylight. Sorry, this is the could it be that you are afraid of. Alexstrasza has been liberated by me. Orcs, your doomsday is here. This was followed by a voice that was familiar and extremely hateful to the horde. Countless magical lights shot out from the inside, passing over the heads of the human knights and holy knights. It was like a waterfall of the Milky Way falling from the heavens, exploding into the orc army. Boom boom boom. After a series of explosions, other than the chieftains, there were no longer any orcs alive in the dark army. Even someone like Orgrim, who had amazing magic resistance, could not avoid being sent flying by the violent magic. The power of this magic, Duque. Every knight turned around in surprise. He did not disappoint anyone. Duque's not-so-muscular figure appeared in the middle of the gate. Behind him was a somewhat bashful Sasha. Nodding to everyone, Duque raised his head and shouted, "It's time." Muradin. This was a voice that contained magic. It penetrated the walls and spread far away. Before the orcs could react from the explosion, they suddenly realized that there were many holes on both sides of the huge tunnel. Countless dwarves waved giant axes and wore hammers as they came out of the holes that were only half the height of the orcs. They did not care about the consequences and started fighting. Muradin Bronzebeard was the first to attack. He raised his war hammer high, "Brothers of Bronzebeard, for victory. For the future. For tomorrow. For our descendants, we will no longer live under the shadow of these greenskins. Kill! Kill!" The holy knights, who were already exhausted, released their strongest notes since the start of the battle. The already dazzling holy light shone even brighter. They were like small suns that crushed towards the horde. No, impossible. It shouldn't be like this. Orgrim's fangs were as sharp as ever. The hammer of destruction that he wielded was still powerful. He could send more than 10 dwarven warriors flying or even kill them with a single sweep. However, all they could see were orcs struggling in despair. Every orc was worthy of the word valiant. But so what? They lost. This time, he was truly defeated. Rexer could not save the horde. He, Orgrim, could not do it either. Even the Red Dragon army, which they relied on the most when they were reorganizing, would immediately rebel the moment their queen was freed. One could imagine the countless red dragons roaring and twisting their necks to bite the dragon-howling orcs that had been riding on their backs for so long to death. No. Duque. Only you. Duque, you must pay the price. Orgrim used all his strength to leap high into the air and throw his hammer of destruction at Duque. Chapter 521. Oh no. Dodge. Don't dodge. At this moment, two completely different factions appeared among the holy knights. Those who were close to Duque all prioritized Duque's safety. No one thought that a mage should fight a warrior head-on. However, Uther shouted that he couldn't dodge. Why? Because in that moment, Duque's figure overlapped with Thoradin the Great in Uther's eyes. Fighting head-on was a man's romance, and also a symbol of courage. If Duque considered himself a mage, then he definitely had a reason to dodge. A single flash would solve all his problems. If Duque wanted to become a true leader, then Duque definitely couldn't dodge Orgrim's attack. If he dodged, then he would lose the reason for everyone to follow him. What would Duque do? The answer was out. Duque pulled Sasha behind him with his left hand to prevent her from being affected by the flames. He then slowly pushed out with his right hand. Even if they weren't mages, the knights who didn't know anything about mystical domains could clearly feel the mana in the air surging. Finally, the blue arcane energy solidified. A terrifying aura surged out from Duke's hand, enough to pierce through the entire underground, and spread out in all directions. The bright blue light collided with the hammer of destruction that Orgrim had thrown out. Uther regretted it the moment they collided. What a loss. No. Duque is going to lose. Right. Duque had only thrown out a ball of arcane energy, but Orgrim had thrown out a real semi-divine weapon. Both of them had great power, and usually, the one without a physical body would be at a disadvantage. However, Duque's use of power was ingenious, and it completely changed Uther's understanding of power. From the start, Duque didn't just use one power. Countless arcane bullets formed a continuous path of light. It looked like a river in the sky, or like a water droplet piercing through a stone that had been accelerated by 1,000,000 or even 10,000,000 times. In terms of pure strength, Duque's attack was not as powerful as Orgrim's. Orgrim's strike was strong enough, but it didn't have any aftershocks. Duque's attack was like the growth of all living things. It had a long source and was unable to shake his opponent in terms of quality, but it wasn't too far off either. Then, he made up for it with quantity. Also, it wasn't just the quantity. The arcane missiles that Duque shot out seemed to have some kind of interval or rhythm. The continuous impact destroyed the power and momentum of the hammer of destruction. Of course, everything happened in an instant. If one didn't have amazing perception, they wouldn't be able to tell that Duque had lost first and then won. Everyone could only see that even Great Chief Orgrim's desperate attack could not shake Duke's terrifying aura that was as if a god of magic had descended from the heavens. The moment the two forces collided, the hammer of destruction couldn't shake Duque's magic power at all. The destructive red flames were forcefully shattered, and the blue arcane energy became the only dominant force on this path and on this bloody battlefield. The dim sky was like a remnant of light and shadow, and it was filled with dense blue cracks from the explosion of the arcane energy. For half a second, the entire hammer of destruction seemed to have stopped time, and it was frozen in midair before flying back. Awesome! Not only the surviving holy knights, but even the dwarven warriors who had just killed their way out all cheered. This wasn't the end. Duque suddenly placed his left palm on his right arm. The mana output was further increased. In front of everyone's astonished gazes, Duke actually poured out all the mana he could mobilize in his body at once. Boom! The arcane light arrow that had been shot out turned into a huge arcane light pillar. A beam of arcane light blasted over like a comet crashing down, shooting right into the long and wide passageway. In an instant, it set off an extremely terrifying tsunami. The violent arcane energy set off layers of huge waves, and with a shocking momentum, it surged towards the orcs. This arcane energy wasn't fast, but it could clearly be seen that this energy was spreading throughout the entire path at the speed of an arrow. Everything that came into contact with this energy, such as the walls and the ceiling of the cave, all shattered into pieces. This energy was like a black hole that devoured everything, destroying everything it touched. The first to touch this energy was an orc Chiliarch, and his huge and burly body was directly swallowed up. After letting out an extremely painful scream, his entire upper body completely exploded, leaving only two hairy legs that fell to the ground. At first, Muradin wanted to scold Duque for not being kind enough to even attack his dwarven ally, but after seeing it clearly, Muradin laughed. The killing range of this arcane light pillar was surprisingly based on the height of 170 meters above the ground. Unless the dwarves were courting death and activated Avatar, at this time, no dwarf in the world would be that tall. Faced with this extremely surging power coming at them at high speed, every orc only had two choices. One was to be like a heroic orc and fight head-on. The other was to lower their noble heads and avoid it. The choice that Orgrim wanted Duque to make was copied and pasted by Duque, and sent back to him. Orgrim hesitated. It was another choice between life and death. He could indeed tell himself, I am the great chief, I should save my life, lower my head a little, and reorganize the orcs. As an invader, we will be successful even if we keep the rule of a continent. But if he did this, would he still be considered a brave orc? Would those heroic tribal warriors still treat him as the pride of their tribe? No. Orcs could accept defeat. Orcs could die in battle, but orcs would never allow cowardice. Hammer of destruction had long been sent flying to who knew where. Just like that, Orgrim strode forward, and with a straight punch, he blasted out what might be the last attack of his life. At this moment, time seemed to freeze. Two burly figures suddenly appeared in front of Orgrim, blocking his path. In less than a tenth of a second, the first figure was suddenly hit by the arcane energy. Orgrim could clearly see that the orc's body instantly crumbled into pieces. And the second figure, which was much larger than the orc, was blasted away by Duke's power, crashing into the cave wall beside Orgrim and deeply embedded into it. At this moment, the weakened arcane energy finally landed on Orgrim. Chapter 522. No beast man knew how Duke had become so strong all of a sudden. As Duke's status rose, no one in the tribe could fight with Duke head-on and come back alive. And Orgrim's understanding of Duke was still at Stormwind City, when he attacked Stormwind's stronghold and fought with him directly. At that time, Duke gave Orgrim the feeling that if he had more time, he could still kill him. It was definitely not like now, where he felt an irresistible sense of powerlessness. Even after being weakened twice, Orgrim was still unable to withstand the full power of Duke's arcane spell. Countless times of superposition, the vibrating force instantly exploded on Orgrim's fist and spread throughout his body, making him feel as if he was going to be crushed into powder in the next moment. Although the battle-hardened Orgrim instinctively knew that he would not die from this attack and would at most be seriously injured, the feeling of not being able to take down a beansprout-like opponent like Duke made Orgrim feel like a hero at the end of his road. In that instant, he recognized that the one who stood in front for him was the Black Scar tribe's chief, Kashtrak. The second was the mixed-blood beastman hero, Lexa, whom the entire tribe had once despised and looked down on. As a mixed-blood beastman and ogre, he had a larger and sturdier body than beastmen. At the very last moment, the two heroes used their bodies to protect their great chieftain. "So I'm so weak that I need someone else to protect me," Orgrim muttered to himself. This feeling was so desolate, then, the excruciating pain that made the chief hover between life and death spread through him, and his vision went black. "Chief!" All the beastmen and chiefs exclaimed in shock. What was a leader? A leader was the backbone of a group, the soul and backbone of a group. No matter if it was because Orgrim had fought with Uther for so long and was only half injured, or because Duke had the upper hand in terms of technique, or because Duke had unleashed the Red Dragon Queen's aura to unleash such a shocking attack. In the eyes of both the Alliance and the Horde, it was Duke who killed Orgrim in one hit. Regardless of whether it was true or not, he would roar at it first. Orgrim is dead. The Alliance will win. Kill. Compared to the tribes whose morale first fell to the bottom, and then fell into the abyss, the Alliance's side was like an aphrodisiac first, and then on steroids. This was especially so for those unscientific paladins. In their peak condition, their radiance was even brighter than before. These guys actually broke through on the battlefield. He had broken through his own shackles. He had broken through the limits of his spirit and body. In terms of numbers and quality, the Horde still had the absolute advantage. However, in all directions, in the sky and on the ground, the Horde was being slaughtered by the Alliance like they were vegetables. And at this crucial moment, Orgrim lost consciousness. A snake could not do without its head. Because the chief was unconscious, Zuluhid, who happened to be the vice-commander, rode his dragon into the sky. The vice-chief of the Blackrock tribe, Sabek, was at the front lines. The weakness of the lack of a unified command was magnified. Kargath Blade Fist, who was more bloodthirsty and cruel, ordered them to fight it out with the Alliance. Kilrog Deadeye, who was more rational and resourceful, ordered a retreat. The two completely different orders created the greatest amount of chaos among the beast men. If Orgrim and the others could break through the defensive line in front of the Iron Gate, then everything would be different. If Orgrim had not impulsively thrown out the Hammer of Destruction, perhaps the battle would still be in a stalemate. Unfortunately, there were no ifs. Long live Duke Marcus! They shouted. In every passageway, every pass, every gate, there were the silhouettes of the Alliance's warriors chasing after the Horde. Duque did not participate in this pursuit. Even though a Morning Star mage could continuously recover his mana, he was really exhausted. Ever since he had been ambushed by Ghoul Dan and activated the curse, he had not been able to sleep well for a single day. The shadow of death had always been lingering around his soul. It was only when Alexstrasza, who had recovered her strength, instantly removed the curse and stopped the rapid loss of his life force, that he could finally take a breather. It was not easy for him to make a huge comeback and take the greatest credit. The small credit should be given to the people below him. He could not just eat the meat while his brothers below him did not even get to drink the soup. After confirming the Alliance's victory, Duque's legs suddenly turned to jelly. Beside him, Sasha hurriedly supported Duque. Duque. Are you alright? I'm fine. I'm just a little exhausted after a full-powered attack. Completely subconsciously, Sasha let Duque's entire body lean against her without a care in the world. The approaching masculine aura caused Sasha to be a little confused, but her heart was filled with pride. The world in front of her seemed to be a little blurry. The scenes described in the legends and reality intertwined. At this moment, it was as if she had returned to 2,800 years ago, when the humans and the High Elves worked together to expel the trolls in a dreamlike war. That was a war between the two races against the fate of death. Back then, they had won everything. 2,800 years later, the new generation of elves and human heroes had once again returned to this battlefield, fighting for the sacred oath that had once again shone with glory. And today, the one leading all of this was the man leaning against her. A man who seemed weak but created miracles time and time again. A man who had protected her and saved her life. Sasha raised the longbow in her hands and shouted with all her might, "Long live Duque." Unlike the relationship between Aurelia and Duque, Sasha did not have the entanglement of fate that the two of them had. If one had to use an adjective to describe her relationship with Duque, perhaps it could be summed up as fanatical worship. A natural fanatical feeling that had come from going through the trials of life and death. Facing Sasha, who suddenly turned around with a burning gaze and looked like she wanted to swallow him up, Duque was a little stunned. He then smiled bitterly, "I just feel like I've let Aurelia down." Sasha insisted, What's wrong with that? The High Elves don't mind polygamy, nor do they mind polygamy. I don't believe that Big Sister won't be willing to share you with me. I said if, there's no if. If there's really an if, I'll snatch you from Big Sister even if I have to shed all pretense of cordiality. We're all women, so why can't we snatch a good man? It's not in my character to silently back out and then wish the other party happiness. With that, Sasha directly gave Duque mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Chapter 523. Duque lost his moral integrity. As an old driver from Mount Akina, he didn't have much moral integrity to begin with. If not for Mediva's humanity, perhaps Duque's moral integrity would have been even worse. Of course, moral integrity was something that could be picked up after it was dropped. Gavinrad returned after a short chase. When he and Ronan heard that Marion was actually Nisario's spy, their mouths were wide open. Marion is a spy. Ronan was the first to not believe it. He was rather innocent, and didn't even dare to look at Marion's breasts, let alone find any traces of her. When did you find out? Gavinrad touched the back of his head. Windsor wanted to know the answer to this question too. I noticed something was wrong from the very beginning. Duque suddenly sneered. Most of the people in the circle of high elven mages are arrogant and prideful. The Silvermoon Parliament used the reason that Qul Salis made too many concessions to the humans during the Alliance back then, and tarnished Anastrian's reputation for 2,800 years. How could they suddenly show heartfelt respect for the newly established Rotterdam Alliance? Windsor was silent. It wasn't that Duque was wrong, but that Duque was right. The reason why the High Elves had the ancient name, Quell Dorii, was because of their unwillingness to be exiled, as well as their pride and self-satisfaction. Logically speaking, everyone knew that without the alliance, Qul Salis would be destroyed at any moment. Knowing it was one thing, but accepting it emotionally was another. To be honest, Windsor knew very well that until now, not many of the High Elves regarded themselves as part of the alliance. Even though most of the people sent to participate in the war against the tribes this time were rangers who were considered to be of low status in the country. And the mages led by Marion were the only exception. Why would a powerful Radiant Moon mage, a Silvermoon Parliament member, deign to come and lick Duque's boots? Others couldn't figure it out. Only Duque himself knew that Marion might be one of Nesario's people. In the history of Azeroth that Duque was familiar with, there was no mention of Marion Firewing. Throughout history, there were not many members of the Silvermoon Parliament. To Duque, the members of the Silvermoon Council were a group of passers-by who were considered powerful at this point in time. The problem was that a powerful Radiant Moon wizard had suddenly appeared in this group of passers-by and directly participated in the process of saving the Red Dragon Queen. Duque immediately raised his guard against Marion. If there were any variables that would affect the course of history, the biggest variable would naturally be Duque himself, followed by Marion. As a high and mighty Silver Moon counselor, it could be said that he had been cheated by his teammates in the Alliance's war. However, a senator who had been loitering in various salons for thousands of years, making a living out of art and music, and who prided herself on being extraordinary and noble, risked her life to follow a cursed and dying Alliance deputy commander to play an adventure of infiltrating the enemy's rear. If Duke still couldn't figure out which side she was on, then Duke must be out of his mind. Therefore, after Duque was killed by Deathwing, Duque refused to resurrect immediately. He was waiting for Marion to jump out herself. Sure enough, she came. In his calculations, Duque didn't expect Sasha to rush in. Fortunately, Marion, like Necros, was overly reliant on the power of Demon's Soul, which was why she was knocked out with a brick. During the subsequent body search, Duque also accidentally found something, another piece of Nesario's scale. It also had the effect of brainwashing. After pondering for a while, Duque decided to promise Alexstrasza to hand over this bad elf who tried to control her and humiliate her again to the Red Dragon army. Hee. I promise I won't kill her, Her Majesty the Queen said. Marion, you're on your own. Duque couldn't imagine how the Red Dragon Queen, who had suffered so much, would vent her anger on Marion. Now, Duque had two scales with Deathwing's soul in his hands. Looking at the remaining 1/5 of the platinum disc that had lost its demonic aura, Duque smiled evilly. Duque, why do I feel like you're a little naughty? Sasha muttered. No, I'm suddenly thinking about how Ghoul Dan will die after activating my death curse. He'll die. This time, everyone was shocked. One had to know that Ghoul Dan was a horde powerhouse who had fought 100 rounds with Antonidas to a draw. If not for his betrayal, the outcome of the Lordaeron battle might have been rewritten. Now, Duque suddenly said that Ghoul Dan would die. Normal people can't do anything to Ghoul Dan. To be honest, even if two Breaking Dawn wizards of the Alliance worked together, they might not be able to kill him. Duque smiled mysteriously. Then how can Ghoul Dan die? Ronan asked. Ha ha ha. Duque couldn't stop laughing. Of course, mortals can't kill a demigod warlock like Ghoul Dan. But Ghoul Dan's mistake is that he shouldn't have courted death and opened Sargera's tomb himself. What? Sargera's tomb? When did the boss of the Burning Legion have a tomb? Ghoul Dan was currently on an island in the Broken Islands of the Endless Sea. The once beautiful temple was now just a ruined mound. However, the ruined appearance did not matter to him. He could feel a powerful pulse coming from the bottom of the temple. The powerful force tugged at him like an electric current, and he could feel that the whole building was shaking under its influence. Hurry up and go in. He shouted to his warlocks. We have to go in. In reality, he was considering whether to bring his subordinates in. He knew that Sargera's tomb was inside, and there was the Eye of Sargera's inside. It had godlike power, but should he go alone or share this power with the rest of the Shadow Council? In the end, he made up his mind. Since he didn't know what else was in this ancient temple, he felt that it was best to bring them along. If necessary, he could kill them when he found Sargeras' eye. Entering the bottom of the temple, Dan found an extremely powerful seal. It was a seal from Aegwin, the previous world guardian. Aegwin's seal targeted almost every intelligent creature in the world of Azeroth, except for the beastmen from Draenor. Gujar easily broke the seal made by the previous guardian, Aegwin. He pulled hard, and the door of the tomb opened. In the next second, endless demons drowned Dan and his subordinates. Chapter 524. Orgrim had a very dark dream. Not to mention torches, even the light created by the shaman's natural magic could not penetrate it. The darkness was so cold that his fingers quickly froze. Even his breath quickly turned into ice crystals and fell to the ground. However, in front of him, the darkness slowly and silently wriggled and condensed into the shape of a human. When the dark humanoid opened its eyes, the whole world became even darker. Looking at the pair of eyes that seemed calm and wise, but were actually fierce and lifelike, Orgrim cried out in shock. "You are Duque." Duque smiled evilly. "Orgrim. You and your tribe will pay for the bloody massacre you caused when you invaded the world of Azeroth. I declare that you will be imprisoned for eternity." "No, we are not wrong. The ones who are wrong are the demons. They poisoned us. They tricked us into drinking that terrible blood." Ignoring Orgrim's protest, the entire world became even darker. Countless dark arms reached out from all directions, firmly suppressing Orgrim's resistance. While laughing eerily, they approached Orgrim and finally grabbed him, throwing him into an eternal prison made of divine power. Ha ha ha. As long as I, Duque, exist, the tribe can forget about becoming the overlord of this world. Ha 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 ha. Duque's evil laughter echoed endlessly in Orgrim's mind. Ah! Orgrim suddenly sat up and screamed, scaring the orcs around him. When he opened his eyes, Orgrim realized that he had just had a nightmare. "Great Chief, you're awake." His face was clearly in a sorry state, and even two of his fangs were broken, but Zulud had a bright smile on his face. "Zulud, I was made a fool of by a dragon cub that couldn't be raised properly. Don't worry, I'll slaughter him and make a stew for myself." At this time, Orgrim realized that all the orcs around him looked like a defeated army. He was carried on a simple stretcher. He heard a loud crashing sound. If he was not wrong, he should be near a giant rock dam. Even though he had a bad feeling, Orgrim still asked, "How's the battle going?" Without hiding anything, Zulud replied, "Terrible." The moment that damned dragon queen regained her freedom, the Dragon Roar tribe's cavalry became snacks for the giant dragons. Then, the giant dragons immediately gathered together and attacked the orcs gathered outside grim battle. Of the hundreds of thousands of orcs, not even half of the tribe survived. Everyone was knocked unconscious. Hearing this, Orgrim felt a sharp pain in his heart. It's all over. It's all over. If it wasn't for the Red Dragon Legion, they would not have been able to. But now, even if the Red Dragon army really didn't like to get involved in mortal wars like the rumors said, the destruction of these troops in the wetlands was enough to cause the greatest adverse impact on the overall situation. Looking at the sky in the distance, there were a few giant dragons flying at high speed. It was obvious that they were in an intense battle. Once upon a time, when he received the report that the Black Dragon King might participate in the battle to liberate the Red Dragon Queen, Orgrim and Zulud cursed Deathwing for being a busybody. Although he didn't know what role Deathwing played in this incident, Orgrim suddenly hoped that Alexstrasza and her Crimson Dragon Legion would be the victor of this cruel aerial battle. At the same time, on top of Grim Battle Peak, Gavin Rad and the others were dumbfounded. After the battle with the Horde, not only did you, as the Alliance's Deputy Commander-in-Chief, not manage the overall situation, you actually had the nerve to come and watch the show. It was one thing to watch the show, but what was the meaning of taking out so many things? Even if you were a bystander, you should at least have a sense of propriety, right? Looking at what Duque took out from his inventory, everyone was dumbfounded. It was a round dining table with a white tablecloth. Four gorgeous golden wine glasses were placed on the white tablecloth, and the glasses were filled with freshly opened bottles of red wine. The plates, which were as clean as new, were filled with all kinds of snacks. It was a pity that fresh fruits could not be stored in the inventory. Otherwise, this would have been a perfect picnic. "Brother, what are you playing at?" Duque warmly greeted everyone. He pulled out a stool and sat down. "Everyone, don't stand on ceremony. Sit, sit, sit. I've activated the phantom mist. Nesario can't see us." "Duque, this doesn't seem like a good idea." "What's wrong with it?" "I'm already giving him face by not making cola popcorn." None of the natives of Azeroth knew what cola popcorn was. Seeing that Duque was acting cool, everyone sat down suspiciously. It was Sasha, who was the most curious, who adapted the fastest. She took a sip of the wine and ate the biscuits. "Duque? We're here to watch the show." "Of course we're here to watch the show. The civil war between the 5 dragon aspects of Azeroth is a once-in-a-lifetime event. If you don't watch it, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Furthermore, Nesario actually wants to brainwash me into becoming his slave. I don't have the ability to participate in such a great battle. I'm happy to watch him get beaten up like a dog. Come, everyone, place your bets. How many minutes can Nesario last from now on? Those who win will get double the compensation. Nesario is the king of the black dragons, after all. 10 minutes. I'll bet a copper." After hanging out with Duque for so long, Gavin Rad had a tendency to fall in the direction of the shame of the paladins. Ronan thought for a moment. "A magic jade. 15 minutes. Duque rolled his eyes. "Damn it, I was the one who gave you your magic jade." Sasha was the most generous. "I'll bet my entire fief that Deathwing won't last 5 minutes." Duque almost spat out a mouthful of blood. "Hey! That's enough." Sasha was unmoved. "First of all, my legendary fief is still in the hands of the orcs. Second, if I really lose all my fief, then I'll live in Karazhan." Duque's facial muscles kept twitching. He really didn't know that Sasha had such a petulant side to her. If she won, the fief would be doubled, but if she lost, she would blame it on him. It seemed like this lady was going to win no matter what. At this moment, in the sky, the battle between the 5 dragons had entered a white-hot stage. In the beginning, Deathwing was suppressing the 3 giant dragons and beating them fiercely. How fierce was he? Just like Lu Bu. However, when Duque destroyed Demon's soul. Chapter 525. Time went back to more than 10 minutes ago. Deathwing was blasted to the ground by Maligos, the king of magic. Naturally, he was furious. While flying backward at high speed, Deathwing's body grew rapidly, from a small black humanoid to a terrifying existence that was nearly 100 meters long and had a wingspan of tens of meters. Almost at the same time he appeared, the red dragon soaring in the sky also noticed him. A whoop! Without the slightest hesitation, all the red dragons in the sky ignored the orders of the orcs on their backs and attacked Deathwing crazily. Originally, the red dragons did not want to listen to orders from the bottom of their hearts. Coupled with the hatred they had with the black dragons, it had lasted for 10,000 years since ancient times. This hatred, so thick that it could not be dispelled, caused the red dragons to completely lose their minds. Idiots! Looking at these little red dragons, Nesario sneered. At least a dozen red shadows streaked across the sky and flashed towards Deathwing. However, in front of the Black Dragon King who had revealed his true form, these young red dragons were really not enough. That's right, it was different from the 2 red dragons that had ambushed him previously. This was Nesario's perfect form. In contrast to the further enlargement of his body, there was a more terrifying speed, reaction, strength, and vitality. Deathwing dealt with these red dragons so easily that it reminded people of swatting mosquitoes. A single flap of his dragon's wings could tear a red dragon that could not even be dealt with by an entire human army into pieces. A sweep of the dragon's tail could shatter the spine of a dragon that was more than 30 meters long, shattering its body into pieces. In less than half a minute, there were no red dragons that could fly in the entire sky except for him. Deathwing flapped his wings and grabbed a seriously injured dragon high up with his left claw, roaring to celebrate his victory. Blood was still oozing from the deep wound on the victim's chest and abdomen, and his claws also had burn marks. That was the price of touching the acid poison that flowed out of the fire patterns on the black dragon's body. None of the opponents the Wings of Death had encountered had been able to escape this. "Are there any more idiots who want to die?" Nesario shouted in dragon language. Along with the shout, Deathwing let out a deafening roar. He wanted to let all existences know that he was the supreme overlord, be it the sky or the earth. However, in response to him were several roars from the direction of the grim battle fortress. It turned out that there was more than one idiot who dared to come to die at this time. Deathwing soon discovered them. There were actually 3 idiots, and they were not just 3 ordinary idiots. The beautiful and elegant green, the gorgeous and dazzling blue, and the mysterious and strange earthy color, these 3 colors in his field of vision truly evoked Nesario's ancient memories. Only at this moment did Deathwing confirm that those fellows weren't simply sneakily attacking him through the Emerald Dream. They were truly participating in the battle. Isara, Nosdorm, and my good friend Maligos. Nesario's dragon had a very human-like expression of mockery on his face. "Your reckless actions must come to an end, brother," Isara, the Queen of Dreams, said calmly. "Brother. I have never been your brother, Isara. Open your eyes and face reality. Now, there is nothing that can stop me from creating this new era that belongs to our dragon race." "The Supreme Dragon King, Deathwing?" Isara said sarcastically. The Black Dragon King nodded shamelessly. "Not bad. This honorable title is indeed worthy of my strength. However, Isara, to prevent your scales from getting hurt, you'd better go back to your dream and sleep. And you, Nosdorm? Aren't you busy playing with mud every day? Ha ha ha. You bunch of idiots, have you forgotten who is the real strongest here? To deal with the 3 of you, I can give you 2 claws. You're dead." As if reflecting his anger, Nosdorm twisted his body, and the huge dragon body made of sand shone with a golden brilliance. At the same time, his gem-like eyes also emitted a dazzling light. "I've changed my mind, Nesario. I want you to become my collection in advance." Tisk. Deathwing spat out a corrosive breath disdainfully. "What about you, Maligos? Don't you have anything to say to your old friend?" Astakasta. A series of ancient dragon words sounded very elegant, but when translated, it actually meant one thing, F*ck your whole family of females. As a bonus for the answer, the Blue Dragon King opened his huge mouth. A stream of ice shot out from the crisscrossed fangs, crossed the void of 1,000 meters, and accurately brushed past Deathwing's body. No, it was not that Maligos was too accurate, but that Deathwing did not even bother to dodge. As soon as the ice particles came into contact with the terrifying black dragon's body, millions of small crab-like parasites immediately appeared. These insects desperately wanted to tear off the black scales and flesh. Humph. Deathwing snorted coldly, and acid sprayed out from the fiery red patterns on his body. As if covered in a mask, the dragon's entire body was wrapped in sticky black acid. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Countless miserable screams sounded, and almost all the magical creatures released by Maligos died in an instant, leaving only a few. The black dragon skillfully picked up one of the insects with his claws and swallowed it in one gulp. He smiled at the enemies in front of him, revealing a row of sharp teeth. "Weak. Too weak. So weak that I'm ashamed to be associated with you. It's all because of your conspiracy back then," Isara said coldly. "Ha ha ha. You can only blame yourselves for being too stupid to be deceived. Alright, Since you're all as weak as insects, then you should end up like these insects. Nesario suddenly let out an earth-shattering roar and pounced on his opponent. The three dragon aspects used all their skills. Maligo's gorgeous magic that could destroy a human city was not dodged by Deathwing. If it were to pierce through a soap bubble, it would be easily broken. Nozdormu's time ability did affect Deathwing, but from the looks of it, the impact would not exceed 2%. It was completely harmless. Izura's mental power attack was more effective, which also caused her to have to bear the most attacks. The battle was one-sided. The three dragon aspects used various physical and magical means to attack the Wing of Death, but Neltharion resolved all of them effortlessly. No matter how hard they attacked, the cruel fact would not change, due to the fact that they had contributed a large part of their power to create the dragon soul. These dragon aspects were as weak as newborn babies compared to Deathwing. Chapter 526. The disparity in strength between the two sides was too great. This could not be considered a battle at all. If one had to add a definition to such a duel, it would be playing. In addition to the characteristics of the dragon aspects, the three dragons were actually not specialized in melee combat, not even Nozdormu. He was more inclined towards techniques and special abilities. In the end, the three dragon aspects, who were equally famous 10,000 years ago, were chased around like rabbits being chased by Deathwing. Anyone who saw this scene would feel a sense of suffocation. Even Deathwing, who was part of the duel, could not stand it anymore. He could not help but mock, "Poor and sad fellows, is this the limit of your strength? Your strength can't even tickle me, and this is the attack you made with the determination to die. Laughable, too laughable." There was no real anger, nor was there a desperate charge of death. The three dragon aspects seemed to be holding their breaths as they fought with Deathwing. This made Deathwing feel a little bad. "Ha ha ha. What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for me to be exhausted and reveal a flaw? Are you waiting for the so-called miracle to happen? Or are you waiting for Alexstrasza to break free and join the siege? Ha 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 ha. I'm dying of laughter. For me, what's the big deal if one more ant joins the battle? Ant? That's not necessarily the case." It was rare for Izura to open his eyes a slit. A psychedelic light flowed out from the dragon's eyelids, making him look very mysterious. "I was prepared to persuade Nozdormu and Maligos to join me and fight to the death with you, but an interesting human gave us a better choice." "Human? Wait. Are you talking about Duque?" Deathwing seemed to be a little panicked. Yes, only a human's dream could bypass his surveillance and directly contact Izura. That's right. At this time, the cunning Black Dragon King suddenly showed a mocking expression. "Idiot. I've never trusted this slippery fellow. He doesn't know what my goal is at all. He can't control the demon's soul, and he doesn't know the incantation to control Alexstrasza." Nesario put forth a great deal of arguments, and they sounded very much like the case. At this moment, Maligos, the king of magic, spat. "That kid doesn't need those things." The king of time, Nozdormu, sneered. "For a character that doesn't exist in the timeline, he has the ability to ignore the maze of lies and directly walk from the beginning to the end. Nesario, you seem to have forgotten that you gave that kid a piece of your scale. The demon's soul can't resist your power." "Impossible." "How did you know?" "Hee hee. We just know it." Nozdormu's words were like the curse of death, firmly grasping Nesario's heart. He suddenly realized that he could only count on the female elf who had fallen after being hypnotized and seduced by him. Unfortunately, he was destined to be disappointed. Almost as soon as Nozdormu sentenced him, a colorful light rose from the bottom of the stronghold. Roar! 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 Three dragon roars sounded almost at the same time. The three dragon aspects in front of him seemed to have become larger, as if they had been inflated. Suddenly, their bodies expanded by 3 times, and they became existences about the same size as Nesario. This was not a simple, meaningless transformation spell. This was a change on the level of power. From quality to quantity, it was a change in strength. It was not one dragon, but 3 at the same time, and the same change had occurred. Impossible, the Black Dragon King was suddenly captivated by the chill. This level of power was both unfamiliar and familiar. 10,000 years. It had been a full 10,000 years. Ever since the ancient war 10,000 years ago, when he deceived the 4 dragon aspects and injected their souls and power into the dragon soul, he had never regarded his 4 siblings as opponents. And now, he felt the changes in the 3 dragons in front of him. Even if Nisario didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that his originally perfect plan seemed to have made a fatal mistake. Duque. Hey! Izura. Nasdormu. Do you feel it? Do you feel it? Maligos repeated his question to his siblings nervously. I've regained my power. All the magical elements are crawling in front of me. Ah! How perfect! It's time. Nasdormu replied. His gem-like eyes flashed with an unusually bright light, and he asserted like a charlatan, that's right, fate has shifted. I see that your death has been greatly advanced, Nisario. Yes. It's time. Izura opened her charming eyes. At that moment, her eyes were so eye-catching that Deathwing could only try his best to avoid meeting her psychedelic gaze. The 10,000 years of nightmare is over, she murmured. Our dream of restoring the glory of the dragon race for 10,000 years is finally coming true. At that moment, a clear and melodious roar of a dragon rushed into the sky from the Grimbator fortress below. Within a few seconds, a huge red dragon's shadow began to expand rapidly in the vision of the 4 dragons. The life-giver, the red dragon Queen Alexstrasza had appeared. At that moment, if Nisario still maintained his human form, his face would be darker than the bottom of a pot. Unfortunately, he was already an ugly and ferocious black dragon. Naturally, he could not be darker. Sister, are you all right? Alexstrasza nodded her huge dragon head. Compared to the torture I've endured, I've gained more. What we lost 10,000 years ago has been returned to us. Demon's soul. That damned, demon's soul, no longer exists. The insignificant human that you despised, Duke Marcus, destroy him. Alexstrasza's declaration resonated with the other 3 dragon aspects. They all roared in joy. Impossible. Deathwing roared. Lies. All lies. How could someone as wise as me be fooled by a mere human? Impossible, you must be lying to me. The red dragon queen spread her sky-covering wings and revealed her sharp and huge claws. Despite the torture she had suffered when she was imprisoned, she did not look weak at all. No. Alexstrasza corrected him. The only lie that needs to be corrected is your so-called invincibility. Now, use your body to experience whether we have recovered our strength or not. That's right, Nasdormu said hatefully. I've always wanted to prove that it's a ridiculous theory. Chapter 527. Returning to the present, when Duque assumed the posture of an onlooker, he happened to run into the 4 dragons who had recovered their strength and were fighting each other. It would be perfect if there were kebabs or hot pot at this time. That was what Duque thought. Duque casually asked Gavin Rad, say, do you think Nisario would feel F***ked when he suddenly found out that his old opponent had regained his strength? It was the first time the paladin had heard the word F***ked. The word was so vivid that it made him look like he was constipated. Ah! The mating of a dragon and a dog. Will a new species called a dragon dog be born? Ronan thought very seriously. Pfft! Sasha was already laughing. What dragon dog? It was clearly Duque teasing Nisario. Duque squinted his eyes and looked at the Dragon King who had been beaten like a dog in the air. He felt great. The word F***ked wasn't enough to describe Nisario's current mood. Wings of Death was indeed suffering. His current situation was like a person teasing a few puppies. At first, he thought that the other party was just a few huskies, but then he realized that they weren't huskies. If it wasn't a dog but a wolf, then forget it. In the end, he realized that the other party had skipped the level of a wolf and went straight to the level of a three-headed hellhound. Wings of Death found that he was being attacked by 4 types of elemental powers that were almost unfamiliar to him. In the past, when he fought these opponents, it was like he was beating up their illusions. Every move had a gorgeous appearance, but it couldn't cause any substantial damage to him. Now it was completely different. He was facing the full force of the 4 dragons, and their strength was comparable to his. 1 hit would be very painful, 2 at the same time would be injured, 3 at the same time would be seriously injured, and 4 at the same time would really make him kneel. Nesario was shocked to find that he couldn't resist the combined attack of the 4 dragons at all. Low-level and low-density magical elements couldn't possibly impact the denser high-level magical elements, so the frost or fire elemental magic that Malygos had blasted at him couldn't shake him at all. The only thing that was more effective was the cloud that Malygos had brought that made him feel a little suffocated. This kind of auxiliary magic that wrapped around his throat and nostrils made him quite angry. What about now? The attacks from Malygos tended to be more direct. The Dragon Queen of Malygos had died at the hands of Neltharion back then, so the Blue Dragon King was furious to the extreme. The attack power of this crazy dragon was almost on par with his. Countless icicles with electricity shot towards Nesario from all directions, and the heat and cold descended on the Black Dragon King at the same time. Although the enchanted plate armor embedded in the black dragon's skin could eliminate most of the violent magic storm, it did not mean that the Deathwing could rest easy. That was because the enchanted plate armor was beginning to loosen. Once the plate armor fell off his body would collapse before the other dragons could attack him. Previously, Nozdormu could only speed up the passage of time on Deathwing's body, making him endure the torture of years and slightly drawing away his power. Now, Nozdormu unleashed the quicksand of time on him, continuously stealing the vitality of Deathwing. Deathwing felt weak all over, and the bones in his body stiffened. The most terrifying thing was that even his thinking had become slow. If it was before, Deathwing could stir up the chaotic power in his body and evaporate the quicksand completely before these effects caused permanent damage. But now, Deathwing panicked to find that if he allowed Nozdormu's time power to work endlessly, he would be running in the direction of idiocy, never to return. However, for Deathwing, among the 4 enemies, the most cunning and dangerous one was Isera. Previously, Neltharion, who had already trained multiple dragon traits under the whispers of the ancient god Enzos, could easily sweep away the dreams that Isera had created in his mind. At this time, under the attacks of Malygos and Nozdormu, his energy had been seriously scattered. Relatively, his resistance to the mental domain had also decreased a lot. Isera could easily invade his mind and lead him to the most terrifying nightmare. He seemed to have realized that the nightmares he had created previously were not effective, because this terrifying ancient dragon had seen countless horrors, bloodshed, and cruelty. It was not an easy task to disturb his mind. This time, Isera provided some more absurd nightmares to Deathwing according to the script provided by Du. Although he was in the middle of a fierce battle, Neltharion was daydreaming. I'm a dairy, my name is Leo. I'm a single dog, dragon. My wife ran away, and I don't know where my children, Lien and CIA, have gone. As the Double 11 is coming, I have nowhere to go, so I can only go on Taba at home. Ah! I'm so lonely. I really want to get drunk and forget all my worries. Hey! I only bought 2 bottles of wine, why did my pair of claws get chopped off? Is this the so-called chopping off your hands on Taba? Although he knew that it was a dream, this absurd and incomprehensible dream involved too much of Neltharion's mind. When he came back to his senses, he found that Alexstrasza had already attacked him with a fierce spell that even he did not expect. Neltharion screamed. Even his fine gold armor could not mitigate the terrible impact of this attack. Deathwing immediately released a powerful shield to resist, but he was already injured. His body endured pain that he had not experienced for decades. Just as he was about to fight back, the daydream came again. This time, he turned into a black dog. My name is Black Gooden. My beloved Xiaohua has eloped with the old Wang dog next door. I'm so sad. Master Enzos is so unscrupulous. He even fed me expired dog food. Woo woo woo. Neltharion had no time to react to what was going on. The pain came again. When he came back to his senses, he was shocked to find that a huge piece of plate armor on his chest had been torn off by the red dragon. The pain of the wound itself was bearable, but what frightened him the most was that he suddenly found that his body was showing signs of cracking again. At this time, Alexstrasza flew in front of him like a goddess of vengeance. She glared at Deathwing, but there was still a trace of pity in her eyes. You have to pay for your conspiracy and betrayal. You will experience all the pain that I have experienced, Black Dragon. Let's see if you can feel better than me. Chapter 528. The momentary panic quickly subsided. Nisario was indeed Nisario, the peerless dragon who had dared to trick more than half of the dragons back then. In addition to being sinister and cunning, his unparalleled ruthlessness and ferocity were also part of his multiple personalities. A furious roar rang out, and a shockwave that could be seen with the naked eye rippled out, causing the remaining clouds in the surroundings to scatter. Deathwing launched a counterattack. A huge sphere made of pure dark energy appeared between his front claws. The dark light that flowed out of the sphere was like a black hole that attracted the attention of the four dragons. Then, he threw the energy sphere behind Alexstrasza to the left, where the other three dragons were. The Red Dragon Queen tried to block it, but the terrifying dragon breath that she spewed out had yet to touch the sphere when the dark energy exploded. It suddenly split into three huge black arrows of light that drew zigzagging arcs in the sky. They strangely ignored the defense and evasion of the three dragons, and directly hit their bodies. Bam! This attack caused Isara and the other two giant dragons to roll back. Alexstrasza tried to use her dragon tail to slap Nisario, but she was trapped by the acidic mist spewed out from the right hind leg of the Black Dragon King. The corrosive mist with dark power stained her tail, and she had no choice but to spray a small dragon breath on her tail to purify it. After easily forcing the four dragons to retreat, Deathwing snarled contemptuously, "Fools! Show me all your ultimate moves. The result will not change. I am the embodiment of power. You are nothing but afterimages of the past in front of me." Nisario's arrogance was justified. When the Titans created the 5 dragon aspects, the strongest was originally Malygos, the king of magic, followed by Nisario, who had the power of the earth. However, after Nisario used Demon's Soul to severely injure Malygos, kill the Blue Dragon King, and annihilate almost the entire Blue Dragon race, Nisario became the boss. Now that Demon's Soul was destroyed, the 4 dragons had only regained their past power. It did not mean that they had completely recovered from their injuries. Therefore, in terms of individual combat power, the Wing of Death, Nisario, was definitely the well-deserved leader. Moreover, there was another problem. Because they had lost their power for over 10,000 years, the 4 dragon aspects were a little unfamiliar with their own power. Obviously, Nisario didn't understand what it meant to be cool for less than 3 seconds. In the next round, he was about to be taught to be a dragon. Malygos' large-scale magic bombardment interfered with his vision. Nozdormu's slow and Isara's nightmare attack arrived at the same time. Deathwing realized that the Red Dragon Queen had removed another piece of plate armor from his thigh. Intense pain that penetrated deep into his heart. Black Dragon, don't underestimate us opponents from the past. Alexstrasza's crimson shadow filled Deathwing's vision. The 4 great dragons worked together so perfectly that even he was a little surprised. What surprised him even more was that the 4 great dragons, for some reason, knew his weakness very well. Their spells were the same as before, unable to cause any substantial damage to him. With his own strength and the protection of the plate armor embedded under the dragon's skin, no one could hurt him in a direct attack. However, tearing off his alloy plate armor was different. They didn't even need to do anything. His own violent power would destroy him. It would have been fine if it was just once, but 2 consecutive targeted attacks made the Black Dragon King shudder. However, Deathwing wasn't someone who would give up so easily. Even if his weakness was exposed, it didn't mean that he would surrender. The dragon aspect's arrogance and insanity drove him. Ha ha ha. Underestimate? I don't need to underestimate you. What's in front of you is the absolute difference in strength. Your combat skills are far inferior to mine. Nesario turned to look at Izura. The key to your attack is on Izura. As long as I withstand her nightmare, I'll be able to kill her. As long as I withstand her nightmare, you can't do anything to me. The Red Dragon Queen's expression changed. The 4 great dragons understood that no matter who fought Deathwing in close combat, they wouldn't be able to do well. If Izura couldn't make him pause for a short while and reveal a flaw, then it would be difficult to fight this battle. However, of course, they wouldn't believe it. The 4 dragons launched their combined attack again. Unfortunately, as Nesario said, he began to resist Izura's nightmare. He even began to affect Izura in the spiritual domain, causing his crazy dreams to invade Izura. The 4 great dragons tried to make a melee attack, but the effect was terrible. Nesario, who was more agile, used his tail to send Alexstrasza flying. His wings slapped Izura and Maligo's heads, and his left claw opened up a huge hole of more than 20 meters in Nozdorm's chest. If Nozdorm wasn't a dragon made of sand and metal, he would have been seriously injured even if he didn't kneel down. Nesario said triumphantly, ha ha ha. So what if you've recovered your strength? The era of the 4 of you is over. After I kill you all, I'll steal all the eggs of your races and create a perfect world that belongs to me. At this time, in the communication circuit that Izura had constructed with dreams, the 4 great dragons were discussing urgently. What do we do? My magic doesn't have any effect on him. Maligo's was a little discouraged. I'm too slow. I still can't keep up after slowing him down. Nozdorm gritted his teeth. If Sister Izura can still control him. Alexstrasza said unwillingly. At this time, Izura suddenly said weakly, actually, I still have a dream that I haven't used. That was given to me by Duque. Why not? The 3 great dragons said in unison. Because it's too bad. Izura felt like crying. Maligos, who hated Deathwing the most, immediately asked, what dream is it? Let me see. Izura hesitated for a second while Wings of Death was talking nonsense, but he still released the dream. The Red Dragon Queen's face couldn't get any redder. Nozdorm said, this must be noted down. Maligos spat. TSK, she's not my Dragon Queen, why not send it? Izura was speechless. Finally, Alexstrasza said shyly, let's vote. Those who think it can be used raise their claws. 2 firm male claws and 2 weak female dragon claws were raised. Okay, it's unanimous. The next moment, the 4 great dragon aspects attacked again. This time, Izura released a new nightmare for Nesario. In the dream, a very fake black female dragon was being attacked by a Shiba Inu that was full of Photoshop marks. All of this was not the point. The point was that Nesario immediately recognized that the black female dragon was Sinestra, well, his wife. Chapter 529. It was the animal world. It was often shown on CCTV. Hadn't they seen a dog that grew up with a lion in the zoo making a scene with a lioness? Those who hadn't seen it should go and make up for it. Was this dirty? No, this was definitely not dirty. People with dirty minds would think of bathing at the sight of water, and would think of beautiful women bathing at the thought of bathing. People with pure minds, such as Duque, who was known as the honest and reliable little husband, the pure and flawless Marcus, would never think of such things. It was like a guy who called Brother Chun a man all day long. Who would believe that Brother Chun was a real man? Wasn't that right? In any case, with such a clumsy Photoshop, it was obvious that it was fake. Normally, no one would believe it. Whoever believed it was mentally ill. Well, it just so happened that Nesario was mentally ill, so he believed it. The whispers of the ancient gods had long made him unable to distinguish between illusion and reality, and had driven him crazy. Therefore, he was sometimes cunning, sometimes crazy, and sometimes even he did not know what he was doing. At this moment, what appeared in Nesario's mind was his precious son, Nefarian, and precious daughter, Onyxia. The two dragon faces had turned into Shiba Inu faces. Dad, woof woof woof. Nefarian wagged his tail. Dad, woof woof woof. Onyxia used a Shiba Inu face that came with its own emoji pack to act cute. Then, Nesario had a mental breakdown. He, who thought that he had been cuckolded by a Shiba Inu, let out an extremely tragic cry. No, how could a dog sleep with my dragon queen? His voice spread everywhere. In a place far away from the battle, all the red dragons watching from afar were dumbfounded at the same time. The four dragon aspects immediately pounced on him, taking advantage of his weakness to kill him. Each dragon aspect used all four limbs and the claws on their wings, desperately tearing at the armor on the wings of death. 3 seconds. The wings of death was stunned for a full 3 seconds. When he came back to his senses, he immediately launched a fierce counterattack, but the four dragons quickly dodged like frightened sparrows. Nesario's hasty counterattack did not work. Isara, you're despicable. Nesario's well-founded counterattack left Isara completely speechless. Compared to you who betrayed the entire dragon race. This is nothing. Alexstrasza retorted righteously, even if it is despicable, it is only because Duque is despicable. It has nothing to do with Isara. The Red Dragon Queen decisively sold out Duque. Duque, who was watching from the sidelines, staggered and fell off his chair. What's going on? Spectators number 2, 3, and 4 were shocked. Alexstrasza, you're not kind. What if Nesario comes looking for trouble with me every day? Duque sent a magic message to the queen. Alexstrasza blushed. Well, her face was red to begin with, so there was nothing wrong with it. The queen immediately replied, Don't worry, Nesario will not live to see tomorrow's sun. Come on, he's of the earth element. If I hide underground, I won't be able to see him. Don't play word games with me. The others might not know, but Duque was very clear. In the original history, Nesario did not die until many years after the end of World War III. Humph. You make it sound like the four of us can't kill him. No, no, no. Your Majesty, regardless of whether there is a video or not, I have completely offended Deathwing in order to save you. I'm just a little mortal. Once he runs away, he will definitely hunt me down. I'm not afraid of 10,000, but just in case. Can you give me a promise? That thing, right? Alright, I promise you, if we really fail, I'll make it happen. Phew. Duque let out a long sigh of relief and pretended that nothing had happened. He sat down again. No, my foot slipped. Pfft, who would believe you? Of course, none of them would expose Duque. Only Duque was secretly happy. That thing, if used well, was a real artifact. At this moment, the battle of the 5 dragons had resumed. Deathwing had fallen into a real disadvantage. The main reason was that the scene was too shocking to him. A huge opening that lasted for 3 seconds allowed the 4 dragons to peel off at least a dozen pieces of armor from his body. Blood, acid mist, lava, and all kinds of things splashed out from his open wounds. Now, it was not the 4 dragons defeating Deathwing, but Deathwing himself defeating himself. Bastard! Duke Marcus! I shouldn't have used your hand, I should have gotten rid of you from the beginning. Deathwing's roar in the common language resounded throughout the wilderness, and almost all the remaining humans and dwarves heard it. At this moment, Duque finally shivered. Facing the gazes of the 3, Duque straightened his back. That guy played dirty, and I hit him back. That's all. Is that wrong? That's right. The three of them answered resolutely, but they sighed in their hearts. You even dared to play with Deathwing, who else do you not dare to touch? Above, the four dragons continued to attack. Malygos laughed. You still want to take revenge on a little human? You should take care of your body first. Accompanied by laughter, the blue dragon attacked again. Obviously, the current Deathwing was different from before. After large pieces of armor were torn apart, Malygos' magic became the most powerful attack. The Blue Dragon King's magic could easily go through the Black Dragon's bloody wounds and directly hurt the Black Dragon's muscles and internal organs. Deathwing struggled pointlessly, trying to get rid of the other dragon's attacks while shouting, "Bastard, don't force me, or you'll regret it." Regret? On the contrary. I'll only regret it if I don't let you taste the pain I've suffered. The Red Dragon Queen did what she said. She began to bring the power of life into her attacks. The power of life that penetrated Deathwing's body aroused a greater reaction from the dark and chaotic power in his body, tearing his flesh even more violently. In the face of other attacks, even Izura's nightmare, Deathwing could still put up some resistance. But in the face of Alexstrasza's power of life, he could do nothing. Her attacks were accompanied by pain. Deathwing had never experienced the pain of his body being torn apart by a completely different power. The pain flared up in places where claws and fangs could not reach, biting deep in his life. This most terrifying dragon in the world suddenly let out a shrill cry that no one had ever heard before. Ow 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 ow, this sound contained the power of the whispers of the ancient gods. This scream saved him. The other dragons were shocked by the cry and stopped their spells. Deathwing finally broke free from the encirclement and turned to escape. He flew away at a very fast speed. Although his whole body was still trembling and he was still screaming, he finally succeeded in quickly disappearing from sight. Chapter 530. Seeing the arrogant wings of death suddenly use the ultimate move Soaring Dragon Flash and actually run away with its tail between its legs, every dragon was dumbfounded. Nethario ran away just like that? What happened to the glory of the dragon race? What happened to the resistance to the end? This was not right. We can't let him escape. Nozdormu suddenly came to a realization. Give chase, now. Malygos replied anxiously. Agreed, the Queen of Dreams said calmly. Izura looked at Alexstrasza, who was still circling. Even she was in disbelief at how she had torn the Black Dragon King apart. Sister. Chase. The Red Dragon replied. We have to chase him to the death. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble. The Red Dragon Queen thought of Duke's jinx. If she could not deal with Nethario here, she would owe Duke a huge debt. The four dragon aspects flapped their wings at the same time and continuously sped up to chase the rebellious Black Dragon. Ah! It's gone. Gavin Rad, who was watching the show, looked at the empty sky in shock. I'm still researching how many Breaking Dawn spells each of their moves is equivalent to. Ronan was very professional. What a beautiful firework. Sasha was mischievous. There are more on the ground over there. Duque, who was even more mischievous, pointed at the tribal camp that had been burned to ashes in the distance. Yes, the 5 powerhouses were fighting in the sky, and hundreds of red dragons were cleaning the ground. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. So clean. More than 10 red dragons would descend side by side, like a plane scattering pesticides, covering the entire area. Under the accurately calculated dragon's breath, the scorching flames covered the entire orc camp, leaving nothing behind and no blind spots. When the extremely hot dragon's breath passed, there was not even a struggling man on fire. It was all charred black. Other than the orcs on the outermost periphery of the camp, not many orcs had the chance to escape. However, only the strongest orc clan could occupy the best territory. The flatter and more convenient the territory was, the more powerful the clan would occupy it. Whether it was territory or camp, this had been the rule since ancient times. The result was that almost all the second-tier clans were burned in this battle. Not many of the unranked clans in the periphery escaped. Seeing that there weren't many orcs, the furious red dragons didn't bother to use their dragon breath. They swooped down and picked up the orcs, throwing them high into the sky. Then, the orcs screamed, "Ah!" Some of the orcs just stood there, sweeping their dragon claws from the left and slapping their dragon wings from the right, killing the orcs like how humans would kill cockroaches. The spectators, who had moved their seats to the edge of the cliff at the top of the mountain, had a great time watching. GG. That dragon looks like a newbie. The angle of its dive is terrible, and it can't really use up its dragon breath. Duque made a professional comment. At that moment, Saidan Dathrahan and General Abendis arrived. Duque asked, "Where are Uther and Tyrion?" Saidan was stunned for a moment, then she smiled. To be honest, among the first generation of paladins, only the 3 from Stormwind were close to Duque. These paladins from Lordaeron were only slightly closer to Duque than nodding acquaintances. But Saidan was a friendly person. He didn't care about etiquette and shrugged. "Oh. They're very responsible, unlike a certain deputy commander who slacks off after settling the big things." Saidan's teasing of Duque made Gavin Rad's face turn red. The rest of the assault team was clearly still fighting the stubborn orcs in the passage of the fortress, but they were just spectators. It was a little unkind at the end of the day. Who knew that Duque would be so thick-skinned? Don't abuse the old. I'm old, and it's already amazing that I can complete the mission. I can't fight anymore. The world will belong to you young people in the future. The old man's tone caused the people around him to burst into laughter. But seeing Duque's appearance, Saidan and Abendis couldn't laugh anymore. Most of his hair was white, and the skin on his arms was a little shriveled. When he smiled, his face was full of wrinkles. It was hard to imagine that Duque was actually just a 17-year-old young man. "Sir Marcus, your curse." Abendis stopped halfway through his sentence. Duque smiled. "The Red Dragon Queen just lifted the curse for me." "You've worked hard, Your Excellency." Abendis bowed heavily. "Not only that, I'm also very grateful for your help at such a crucial time." Beside him, Saidan bowed together. At this time, it wasn't just Abendis. Everyone present felt the same. Duque had really worked hard. The entire continent, the 10 countries, and the 3 major races added up to almost 10 million people. It was unbelievable that such a thin young man had to bear such a heavy burden. This was the fortune of the Alliance, but in a sense, it was also their tragedy. It was precisely because so many kings couldn't come to an agreement that the compromise that seemed so terrible before, but now seemed so wise, letting Anduin and Duque take power. Gavin Rad looked at the destroyed orc camp in the distance with hope in his eyes. If that's the case, maybe the war will end in a year. A year? Duque pursed his lips. The war will end with the Alliance's victory in 4 months. Everyone was shocked. Such a large-scale war between the Alliance and the Horde, and Duque actually said it would end in 4 months. Abendis was the most sensitive about the situation. 4 months? We don't know how many orc reinforcements there are on the other side of the dark portal. Your Excellency, isn't this too? Duque waved his hand. No, 4 months is already a conservative estimate. But it's good that everyone knows this. Don't spread it for now. As for the rest, I'll tell the kings at the throne meeting. At this moment, everyone's eyes were shining with excitement and ecstasy. If someone else had said it, they might have scoffed. But who was the one who said it? It was the deputy commander of the Alliance, the invincible and outstanding military strategist, and the Alliance's hero, Duke Marcus. From the first prediction of the Horde's attack on South Shore to the defense line at the South Stream coast, the Battle of the Hinterlands, the Battle of Cuel Salis, and the Battle of Lordaeron, Duque's military theory of killing the enemy is the most important, had led the alliance from a disadvantage where all the kings had fallen to the Horde to a path of total victory. If his judgment was still wrong, who else in the alliance could believe in the inference of the war situation? Really? Sasha was overjoyed. Then what are we waiting for? Quickly go back and tell everyone this news. Anne. Big sis must be anxious. Duque's facial muscles twitched. I still have to wait for the Red Dragon Queen. I need her to help me recover the life I lost. Otherwise, how can I face people like this? Chapter 531. Duque had never been handsome. Compared to Lothar in the movie, he was much less handsome. But this didn't mean that Duque had to accept himself as an old man. Looking at the white-haired Khadgar in the movie, Duque was already pissed. Now that he had become himself. Who could stand a transmigrator suddenly turning into an old man? Fortunately, he still had the Red Dragon Queen as a backup. Alexstrasza, who had bestowed the World Tree with life and the Night Elves with eternal life, could easily make up for his losses. However, Duque didn't expect Sasha to suddenly say, "Don't worry. No matter what you become, I'll still like you." Pfft. The group of single dogs around him all spat out. A group of people stared straight at Duke, as if they wanted to gouge out a piece of flesh from Duke's face. In public, Duque's behavior left people speechless. In private, wasn't it enough that he had Aurelia? He even went after his sister-in-law when most of his men were still single. Did he still have any humanity left? Fine, you're powerful. Go ahead and do it, but do you have to show off your love in front of us? Don't you know that showing off your love is faster? All of a sudden, the guys wanted to borrow flamethrowers from the FFF guild to burn Duque too. Duque was dumbfounded. You don't have to do that even if you want to attract hatred. Will anyone protect me in the future? The innocent Sasha blinked her eyes, as if she did not understand why the atmosphere had suddenly become so strange. Gavin Rad blinked. Boss, give me a piece of land in the Elven Forest. I'll forget about the trauma you caused me today. Duque quickly agreed. Okay. As for the other two singles, Sidan and Abendis, Duque promised to invite them to the Dream Angel Salon in Lordaeron for 3 days. What was a Dream Angel? Even though Sidan gave Duque a, you know what I mean, look, a pure, holy, and upright person like Duque certainly wouldn't understand. Blarg. Well, I'm still a 17-year-old kid. Regardless of whether others believed it or not, Duque believed it himself. To Duque's surprise, the Red Dragon Queen did not appear even after he waited until nightfall. Who knew if they chased Nesario from the Eastern Kingdom all the way to Northrend in the north, then flew to the Kalimdor continent, then circled around Pantalia and completed the magnificent feat of flying around the world. Needless to say, the 5 silly guardian dragons with almost unlimited stamina and driven by their deep hatred might really be able to do it. With no other choice, Duque could only open the portal and return to the Dalajan first. What he didn't know was that the Dalajan, no, almost all the major cities in the Alliance's territory that received the latest news were in an uproar. The Alliance's deputy commander Duke Marcus has liberated the Red Dragon Queen from the evil orcs. 200,000 orcs under the Grimbader fortress in the wetlands have been killed by the Red Dragon's dragon breath. The Horde has suffered a crushing defeat and has begun to retreat from the Earthy Highlands. The Red Dragon army has become the humans' ally again. The Alliance has won. Cheering crowds could be seen everywhere. People were shouting, cheering, and roaring at the sky in ecstasy. Whose tears were flying? Whose smile was in full bloom? As long as one was wearing the Alliance's uniform, be it a 60-year-old uncle or a teenage boy, they would definitely be warmly welcomed by the people. There was an old man holding a collection of fine wine, a beautiful young lady who was as passionate as fire, and a smiling child. Everyone was praising the alliance in their own way. However, this had nothing to do with Lordaeron. After sending out 1,000 people and 250 people, only 192 people returned alive, including those who had lost arms and legs and could no longer fight on the battlefield. The actual loss was more than 90%. It was no exaggeration to say that the elites of Lordaeron were almost burned to the ground. If they had paid such a huge sacrifice in exchange for an equivalent merit, King Tyrrhenus of Lordaeron might feel better. The point was, most of those who came back alive were the paladins of the Silver Hand. Fairness and honesty were the virtues. The paladins of the Supreme Creed. These guys would never lie. They would say to everyone they met, "We launched a surprise attack at the worst possible time. We encountered the main force of the Horde. If it wasn't for Sir Marcus's help, we would have been completely wiped out." Duque. Duque. And it was still Duque. It was as if as long as Duque was still alive, Lordaeron would not be able to rise again. Lordaeron had paid an unimaginably high price for this. More than 1,000 elite knights, mages, priests, hunters, and bandits had died. What did they get in exchange? A wrong time to launch a surprise attack. Tyrrhenus almost spat out a mouthful of blood. So the Lordaeron had paid such a heavy price in exchange for a successful feint attack. If these 1,000 people were put on the battlefield, they would definitely be able to open up new territories. He died quietly in the fortress of Grimbator. It could be said that a general success was built on 10,000 bones. Damn it, Duque had become a general. Why did the people of Lordaeron have to be the 10,000 bones? When he heard the complete news, Tyrrhenus choked on his breath. He coughed so hard that tears came out of his eyes. He coughed so hard that he almost coughed his lungs out. He was bitter. He hated it. He used to hate the Horde that turned the Silverpine Forest into scorched earth. Now, he suddenly realized that he hated Duque even more, who always stole the limelight from Lordaeron. Before this, he had never imagined that there would be a day when he, the king of the strongest kingdom on the continent, would be jealous of a young man who once had nothing. At this moment, he even wanted to assassinate Duque. But he did not dare to do so. Duque, who had returned from hell, was already the #1 hero of the Alliance. And look at Stormwind's attitude. If he dared to touch Duque, Lang would definitely send out 200,000 troops to fight him. The kingdoms that were on good terms with Duque would definitely not sit back and watch. Tyrrhenus secretly gritted his teeth and swallowed his anger. On the other side, Stormwind held a grand welcome ceremony for Duque's return. Duque. Lang rushed up to Duque the moment he stepped out of the portal and gave Duque a bear hug. Cough, cough, cough. Let me go, Duque's face was pale. As soon as Lang let go, Anduin immediately followed up. Duque, cough, cough, cough. I'm dying, Duque's face was pale. Ah. Duque, what's wrong? Duke Bolvar wanted to take the third hit, but he was shocked to find that Duque was almost dead. It was a mess. Chapter 532. Only those who had almost lost it would cherish it. It was precisely because Lang thought that he was about to lose Duque, his most staunch and powerful supporter since the destruction of the Storm Kingdom, that Lang's mood fell into the abyss. Now, don't be fooled by Duke's pitiful appearance. Under the premise that Duke's life wasn't in danger, Duke's pitiful appearance was just a bit of entertainment. The haze of the nightmare had dissipated. A brilliant future was in front of him. How could Lang not cry with joy? That's right. King Lang's eyes were red and moist. Countless pairs of eyes were focused on Duque, who was teasing the king and his ministers. General Tom Seamus looked at Duque, took a deep breath, and roared in a loud and majestic voice. To the hero of the Alliance, the Grand Duke of Stormwind, His Excellency Duke Marcus. 3,000 Stormwind soldiers, in a uniform movement, followed General Seamus, drew their swords out of their sheaths, raised their hands to the sky, and saluted Duque in unison. At this moment, the sword light was like a forest, swallowing mountains and rivers. To His Excellency Marcus. The domineering shout echoed throughout the Dalajan city. These soldiers were not just guards of honor. They came from all over Stormwind, from the most elite Griffin Legion, to the local garrison, to the militia with minimal military training, and even to the refugees who came to South Shore with the refugee fleet. But now, they all had a unified name, Stormwind Elite Soldiers. Each of their hands was stained with the blood of at least 5 orc warriors. They were not only the elites of Stormwind, but also first-class soldiers in the entire alliance. Strong, firm, with combat skills and iron discipline. However, it was such a soldier that everyone's voice carried a sense of worship. Although Duque had long since stopped directly commanding the army of Stormwind, and even the private corps he led alone reached as many as 30,000 people, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was the king's subordinate, but the mention of the name Duke Marcus still made people in awe. To the people of Storm, it was he who subdued the Bloodsail fleet and saved 600,000 civilians from certain death under the noses of hundreds of thousands of orcs. It was him who brought life-saving food to the 600,000 starving refugees and opened up countless wastelands in the Hillsbrad Hills so that the people could live a peaceful life. To the Storm soldiers, the burning of Stormwind City, the ambush at Barradine Bay, the first and second defense of South Shore, the Battle of the Hinterlands, the defense of Lordaeron, and the battle to save the Red Dragon Queen. Duque's name was equal to the glory of a warrior, equal to a miracle. He was synonymous with the god of war. Such a legendary figure was only 17 years old. Looking at Duque's white hair, looking at the wrinkles on Duque's hand that looked like an old man's, thinking of the curse he had received, thinking of the suffering he had to endure for this destroyed kingdom, every soldier's eyes were as red as King Lang's. A sea appeared in front of Duque. It was a sea constructed by the gleam of swords. The sharp swords were raised at a 45-degree angle. As Lang, Andoin, and Duque moved forward, they suddenly parted one by one. It was like the miracles of a sword parting the sea in a legend. The sea parted. At the end of the sea, the king and his 2 ministers sat in an open carriage and slowly set off towards the Violet Square in the center of the Dalajan kingdom. Although the sky was dark, cheers could be heard on both sides of the road. Countless Dalajan people, mage apprentices, and mages crowded on both sides of the road, trying to see the glory of the #1 legendary mage in the alliance. If it was anyone else, even if he was a king, the Dalajan mages would not be so revered. This was an era where the spirit of chivalry was the most revered. Looking at the 7 human kingdoms, except for the Dalajan, no king was a mage. In most human settlements, only the general who led the army to charge would be recognized as a true hero. Mages, on the other hand, were just mysterious people who hid in the protection of the army and released sinister magic. In a sense, it was precisely because of the prejudice of the majority that Duque, a mage hero, was even more precious. Duque was the Grand Duke of Stormwind, but was that important? Didn't they see that even the Prince of Kuel's Salis was mingling in the Dalajan? As long as he was a hero in the field of magic, he would naturally be warmly welcomed by the Dalajan people. In their opinion, Duque, who had once lectured in the Dalajan, was undoubtedly a member of the Dalajan. Duque! 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 The uniform shouts were like a tsunami, rising and falling one after another. The scene and atmosphere made King Lang, who sat opposite Duque, and Andoin, who sat beside Duque, become foils. Of course, neither of them cared. They just smiled at Duque. Duque gently waved his right hand while his left raised the marshal's combat staff from Antonidas. Even after the direct attack of the Wings of Death's shadow flames and such a violent explosion, there was not a single scratch left on it. The staff was still shining with silver light. The head of a winged horse was carved on the staff, emitting a faint silver light. It looked extremely holy and beautiful. When Duque raised the shining staff made by the Dalajan, the crowd's cheers reached its peak. In the square, the representatives of the 9 countries of the Alliance, except for Stormwind, had already gathered. Looking at Duque, every king and every representative had a complicated feeling. They did not expect Duque to do it. With his almost dead body, he led a small team of 5 and penetrated thousands of miles behind enemy lines. He sneaked into the heavily guarded Grim battle fortress while the Red Dragon patrolled in the sky and the beast men roamed the wetlands. He cleverly used the Wings of Death's plot to complete the feat of liberating the Red Dragon Queen. If Duque could be said to be a wise man and a commander who only knew how to command, the current Duque was like a real hero who had been quenched in a furnace. After a real test, he was reborn and became a real hero of the Alliance. His reputation as a hero had been completely established. No matter what happened to Duque in the future, he would become an indelible legend in the history of the Alliance. No matter how much the king of Tyrrhenas secretly mocked Duque, he had to put on a smile and welcome Duque. However, an accident that no one could have imagined happened at this moment. An abrupt voice suddenly rang out in front of the drum music. "Duque, you have become a hero. You also told us that the Red Dragon Legion is no longer a part of the tribe. So, I want to ask you, who should I look for to avenge my son's death?" If it was some blind pawn, perhaps he would have been dragged out and killed by the angry soldiers after saying this. But the person who said this was King Kurtiras, Dalen Proudmoore. Chapter 533. As soon as these words came out, the entire place went silent. Everyone could understand the anger of a father who had lost his son. Everyone could understand the sadness of a king who had lost his heir. Since ancient times, it had always been a sad thing for a white-haired person to send off a black-haired person. But this was the Alliance Conference. Honoring Duque, the hero of the Alliance, was the most important ceremony to show the might of the Alliance after all the suffering he had brought to the Horde. Look, even though the Rotterdam Kingdom had suffered the worst loss, Tyrrhenas still stood there with a look of pride on his face. What's more, this was the Crimson Dragon army, which had extraordinary power. If the Queen was angry, the entire human race would be destroyed, and all the major human cities would cease to exist. Humans would once again split into countless small clans, and return to the position of being at the mercy of others 3,000 years ago. In the end, the Crimson Dragon army was being threatened, and there were not so many ancient red dragons coming out to harm the Alliance. Otherwise, the Alliance would have been destroyed. Now that you, Emir King Kurtiras, have caused a ruckus at this time, who would want to please you? Who would dare to support you? Silence. Deathly silence. In fact, Dalen knew that he would not be supported by any country. He also knew that he should be like Tyrrhenas and swallow his anger. Unfortunately, he couldn't do it. As soon as he closed his eyes, he saw his eldest son, Drake, being burned to ashes by the raging flames. His son's soul haunted his soul. He could not swallow this, not as a father, but as a king. Even though he knew that it was not the right time to say it, he felt that if he did not say it today, he would never have the courage to say it again. He would not have the right to be a father. The air was freezing. The temperature was dropping. Dalen's eyes were filled with tears as he knelt on the cold floor. Perhaps this was a plea, or perhaps it was a form of self-repentance. In any case, he ignored everyone's gaze and disrupted the festive atmosphere. He knelt there. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of him. A figure wearing a mage robe. Other than Antonidas, there was only one person who had the right to wear a mage robe and stand in front of him, Duque. In his heart, Duque was the man who had sacrificed the lives of millions to become a hero. Sigh. Duque patted Dalen's shoulder and said something that not only Dalen, but all the other kings did not dare to believe. Dalen, get up. I'll get Alexstrasza to give you an explanation. What? To make the Red Dragon Queen, one of the world's 5 dragon aspects, give an explanation to the king of a mere human kingdom? What kind of joke was this? It was like asking a lion to apologize to the ant's relatives for accidentally stepping on it and then asking the lion to apologize to the ant's relatives. Since ancient times, who wouldn't admit that they were unlucky to encounter such an extraordinary existence? It was one thing for Dai Lin to go crazy. Duque was going to join him in his madness. What if they infuriated the Crimson Dragon army and caused these abnormal lizards to stand against humans again? Anyone who could become a king was no longer a brute. At this moment, almost all the kings were going crazy. Antonidas could clearly sense that Duque had already sent out a magic message. Wait for 10 minutes. The Crimson Dragon race will give the Alliance an explanation. An explanation? There really was one. Since ancient times, anyone who slayed a dragon would definitely be regarded as a hero by the entire human world. Only the truly high-ranking people knew that those who were slain were lone dragons. They were either banished by the dragons for committing a crime, or they were the descendants of the black dragon that the four-colored dragons did not like. Now, all the kings and representatives were dumbfounded. They stared at the sky blankly. King Daelin looked at Duque in disbelief. After making sure that Duque's face did not show any signs of lying, he stood up with his sword. Facing the night wind, he stared at the pitch-black sky quietly. 10 minutes. Usually, it would be over in a moment. Unfortunately, the oppressive atmosphere made the passage of time extremely slow. Everyone's forehead was dripping with sweat. Everyone was quietly waiting for their judgment, waiting for the one that might appear in the sky. Around 9 minutes later, the moonlight suddenly dimmed. The bright moonlight was blocked by a huge creature. As expected, it was a dragon. It spread its wings, and its scales shone with a dazzling red light. The huge golden vertical pupils seemed to be flowing with blazing lava. The two pairs of fiery horns on his high head were raised high, looking down at the monarchs in the violet square from high above. Compared to this terrifying creature that came from the ancient times more than 10,000 years ago, the armies of the mortal world, status, and power all seemed insignificant. When the dragons soared in the clouds, humans were just ants crawling on the ground. The sky was their domain, and they ruled over the sky. Even though it was easy for different races to have facial blindness, after many days of fighting, every alliance had recognized every single characteristic of this most ferocious ancient dragon. There was no mistake. He was Tyrannes, the one who had sent over 10,000 alliance soldiers into the Sea of Fire. Every alliance soldier nervously clenched their weapons. The higher-ups had indeed announced that the Red Dragon army was no longer an enemy, but who knew if this ferocious lizard would suddenly go berserk? The Dalajan's magic defense system could indeed destroy him, but before this behemoth crashed to the ground, how many people would be killed by him? No one was sure. However, under the watchful eyes of more than 100,000 people, Tyrannes, who had just landed on the specially empty space in Violet Square, suddenly began to shrink. A dragon that could easily weigh more than 1,000 tons became the size of a human. No matter how many times Duque saw this situation, he still felt that it was magical. It was full of all kinds of unscientific things. Of course, pursuing science in a magical world was not a reliable thing to begin with. What appeared in front of the kings was an old man with long white hair, a white beard, and white eyebrows. He was not wearing a piece of armor, only a Greek-like cloth skirt around his waist. His upper body was bare, revealing a strong but full of scars. Who is it? The one who claims to want the ancient dragon Tyrannes to give him an explanation. Don't make it easy for me to find you. Come out yourself. The humanoid dragon released a fierce aura, with a dragon's roar that made countless people tremble. Chapter 534. On the square, the morale of the Dalajan and Gilnea's soldiers was low. The sound of their metal leg guards retreating was piercing to the ears. At close range, the kings who were suffering from the dragon's wrath did not fare as well. Each of them made a fool of themselves, but Tyrannes was undoubtedly the worst. Tyrannes, who only had a combat level of 5, was frightened by the dragon's wrath. He took 3 steps back and collapsed on his throne. Of course, the other kings either took half a step back or knelt on one knee. Even Lang sighed and took a step back. He did not look at Tyrannistas in the eye. Only Dalen Proudmoore held onto his scimitar and gritted his teeth. Even though his legs were shaking, even though the veins on his neck were bulging, even though the veins on the back of his hands were bulging like a dragon's beard, he persevered and faced the terrifying golden pupils of the ancient red dragon without fear. Dalen suddenly took a step forward and raised his scimitar at the dragon. "It's me, Dalen Proudmoore of the Kingdom of Kultiras. This has nothing to do with the Alliance, and it has nothing to do with my kingdom. As a father, I seek justice for my son, Drake Proudmoore, who died under your flames." Dalen was going all out. He was going all out. Of course, he hated the culprit's tribe. However, he was also unable to accept the fact that the murderer who had just killed his son yesterday was now standing beside him as an ally of the Red Dragon Alliance. Then, he would have to suck up to these powerful allies and pretend that nothing had happened to fight alongside the Red Dragon. Of course, he could not forgive himself for causing the entire kingdom of Kultiras to be engulfed by the dragon's flames because of a personal grudge. So, as a father who had lost his son, he challenged Tyrannistas. "Huh? What kind of justice do you want?" The dragon's tone was full of disdain. "A duel." Dalen's voice was powerful. He raised his scimitar and took another step forward. His bloodshot eyes stared at the dragon. "Ha ha ha ha." The giant dragon's laughter shocked everyone in the square. "You?" Everyone felt as if a boulder was pressing down on their chests under the terrifying dragon's might, making it hard for them to breathe. Dai Lin, who had endured the greatest pressure, was bleeding from the corner of his mouth. No one knew whether it was because of the shock or because he had bitten his lips. "Yes. Just me. A tiny human in the eyes of a giant dragon. I know I can't beat you, but I demand a duel at least. This is my last honor as a father." Almost as soon as Dai Lin finished speaking, an anxious voice came from outside. "No, father, don't do anything stupid." Dalen's expression changed. He knew who the voice belonged to, Denreed Proudmoore, Dalen's second son, the de facto crown prince of Kultiras' kingdom. At that moment, Dalen saw a streak of gold in his peripheral vision. It was his lover, Gina Goldsword. Dalen knew that she had broken the taboo and used the teleportation gate to summon Denreed to stop him from doing anything stupid. If Denreed was affected by the dragon's anger, there would be no male heir in Kultiras' kingdom. Gina Goldsword's actions hit Dalen's weak spot. Dalen's facial muscles were twitching. Various thoughts were fighting in his mind. The humanoid dragon sneered, "That's right. You have no chance of winning a duel with a giant dragon. Go back and look after your children. I can't guarantee that your family won't be affected during the duel. You know that it's hard to control dragon breath once it's released." At that moment, Dalen's expression turned cold. He suddenly shouted, "Someone stop Denreed. I, Dalen Proudmoore, will be eternally grateful to him." The gratitude of someone who was about to die. At the same time, his descendants would hate him for eternity. Was there really someone willing to do such a stupid deal? Don't be surprised. Someone really did. Whoosh! A strong gust of wind blew. A huge ice wall that was 3 meters tall, 20 meters wide, and half a meter thick appeared in front of Denreed and Gina. The one who made the move was actually Dooku. Dalen wasn't the only one who was shocked. All the other kings were shocked. Dooku used his other hand to stop Sasha, who seemed to want to do something. He looked at Dalen calmly. "You wanted me to help you get an explanation from the Red Dragon Army, and I did. You wanted me to stop the next king of Kultiras, and I did. You owe me 2 favors. 2 favors? Do dead people need to repay favors?" Dalen suddenly smiled. There were tears in his smile, and there was also a hint of desolation. "From today onwards, Dooku, you are my brother." Without saying anything else, Dalen ignored his son and lover's pleas. He walked forward and threw away his scabbard and armor. This heroic man who had traversed the seas for 20 years, just like that, bare-chested, proudly walked towards the opponent he would normally never be able to defeat. Ha ha ha. My chest is here. Do you dare stab me here? Talonistas laughed haughtily, slapping his broad, muscular chest. There was no sound. Daelin used his scimitar to give his answer as a father. He suddenly lunged forward, lowered his wrist, and stabbed forward. The scimitar was best at slashing, but that didn't mean that the sharp tip was just for show. Daelin's thrust was the limit of a human warrior. He turned into a stream of light, and he and the scimitar became one as he stabbed toward Tyrannes. This was the most perfect stab Daelin had made since he entered the realm of heroes. Perhaps to the dragon's horrifying dynamic vision, this stab was like slow motion, not worth mentioning. Perhaps after this stab, he would be tortured to death by the human-shaped dragon in any way. However, he didn't care. He got rid of all distracting thoughts. He only wanted justice for that stab. The millions of people present couldn't bear to watch anymore. A few kings secretly closed their eyes. Only Dooku calmly watched all of this with a slightly sorrowful expression. Time seemed to freeze. There was no lightning-fast counterattack. There was no bloody and cruel killing. When he clearly felt the scimitar stabbing into flesh, Daelin was stunned. The audience was so shocked that they couldn't speak. This was because Daelin's epic scimitar, which was far from being able to slay a dragon, had slashed horizontally, and the sharp tip of the scimitar pierced through the gap between two ribs on the human-shaped Tyrannes' left chest. The scimitar pierced the human-shaped dragon's heart in half. How is this possible? Chapter 535. Everyone's faces were filled with shock and confusion. Tyrannes' extremely weak but clear voice could be heard. Don't be shocked. In some ways, I feel the same way as you. For my beloved queen, I'm willing to give up everything. For her to suffer less, I'm willing to blind my own conscience and sully my own soul. I'm willing to kill humans for the filthy orcs. So, this is my atonement. You. Daelin's hand went limp without him realizing it. He held the humanoid red dragon that was about to fall, feeling a little lost. Yes. This is the red dragon race's answer to you, to humans, and to the entire alliance. I wonder, are you satisfied now? He wanted to say yes, but when the words came to his mouth, Daelin's mouth was filled with bitterness. He could not say it no matter what. Don't be shocked. You earned this yourself. If you're just a coward, I'll tear you apart in one bite. I, Tyrannes, have ruled this world for 10,000 years. I will not die in the hands of a piece of trash. Even though Daelin could clearly feel the dragon's life slipping away, the dragon's voice was still very clear. Hiss. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The red dragon's arrogance was ingrained in their bones. Ordinary people, no matter how high their status was or how good their reasons were, had no right to demand justice from the Red Dragon army. As expected, only heroes had the right to be acknowledged by the dragons. Thinking of this, everyone could not help but respect Daelin. Tyrannes was still speaking. I know that I've sinned greatly. So, after I die, you can do whatever you want with my body as compensation to you and the entire alliance. However, this is all the compensation from the Red Dragon army. Suddenly, the humanoid Tyrannistas pushed Daelin away. Then, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, his body began to grow rapidly. In less than 3 seconds, he turned back into the dragon that was dozens of meters long. However, unlike the mighty and domineering aura from before, this time, this giant dragon finally began to walk towards the end of its life. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. When the huge body of the dragon was no longer moving, everyone could confirm that the terrible dragon that had been wreaking havoc in the Arthi Highlands and the Hillsbrad area for months, and even destroyed the entire king's city of Riptide Castle, had finally made up for the sins it had committed. Suddenly, someone started applauding. It was Duque. He applauded his brave father, who knew that he was no match for the dragon, but still dared to challenge it alone. Clap clap. The clear and unique applause attracted everyone's attention. Clap clap clap. More people started clapping. Pa 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 pa. They were the elite soldiers of the various countries who were still in the plaza. They were slapping their swords against their shields. They were saluting Dai Lin in a warrior's way. However, the winner of this slightly special dragon-slaying battle was sitting paralyzed on the ground, unable to get up. Everyone could see the cold sweat glistening on his back. Gina and Tanreed hurried over to help Dai Lin up. King Dai Lin didn't go back to rest. Instead, he insisted on coming to Duque. Thank you, Brother Duque. The hero of the Seven Seas smiled sincerely. Even after this battle is over, you must come to call Tiras more often. Of course, of course. Duque smiled. Dai Lin glanced at Lang, who was beside Duque, and whispered to Lang, if Lang or William don't treat you well, you can come to call Tiras. You can choose between a prince or a duke. Hey! Hey! Lang pretended to be angry. On the other side, a triumphant ceremony that had been specially prepared for Duque had been disrupted by Dai Lin. In less than 10 minutes, the ceremony was dismissed hastily. Of course, some people were unhappy about this incident. Some politicians even secretly cursed Dai Lin, saying that Dai Lin had wiped out the cooperation between the Crimson Dragon Army and the Alliance, or more accurately, the Crimson Dragon Army and the humans. Afterwards, in the state guesthouse, Lang also asked Duque about the Crimson Dragon Army. Duque pondered for a while, and decided to reveal the truth to Lang and Andoin. Ah, I didn't expect Tyrannies to do that. That's an ancient Crimson Dragon. Will the Crimson Dragon Army really not mind a powerhouse second only to the Queen? It's alright. Because Tyrannies was about to die anyway. Ha! Lang and Andoin were shocked at the same time. Isn't the life of a dragon unlimited? Andoin asked in bewilderment. Yes. However, even the life-giver can't deal with the torture of the disease. Tyrannies has been suffering from the disease for many years. This is no secret among the dragons. His vitality has been weakening, and he has only lived for so long because of Alexstrasza's support. Duque sighed. Lang asked, then did he do so much for the Queen purely to repay her kindness? And in order to heal the enmity between the Crimson Dragon Army and the Alliance, he deliberately sacrificed himself? Duque smiled bitterly. I can't answer that question. But I think the window of cooperation with the Crimson Dragon Army is not completely closed. Andoin immediately perked up. You're saying that the Alliance can form a legion of Dragon Knights. The Orcs Dragon Knights really made the Alliance suffer. Even with the support of the Wildhammer dwarves from the Eagle Nest Mountain, the Alliance actually lost more than they won. After all, the limit of the Griffin's talent was there. Compared to the WIRMS, they were far inferior. Duque smiled slyly. It's Stormwind that has the opportunity to form a legion of Dragon Knights. This sentence really made Lang and Andoin laugh uncontrollably. Okay, the last question. Duque, how do you solve the problem? That's my personal secret. Duque smiled mysteriously. After sending off the two leaders of Stormwind, Duque suddenly found a red-haired beauty holding a large bottle of wine on his windowsill while taking a shower. The iconic fiery red bikini armor with gold-rimmed edges, and the tall dragon horns on her head all spoke of the owner's identity, the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. Gazing at the bright moon, the queen murmured softly, I realize that human wine can sometimes be a good thing. At least it can numb my nerves when I don't want to think about things. Duque smiled faintly. Don't joke around. This bit of wine can't numb your nerves. If I force my vitality down to 1/10,000th, then it'll be fine. The queen looked back with a sad expression. She seemed to want to cry, but couldn't. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.